There we go. You guys got quiet there for a second. Sorry we were running just a little bit late, but we're going to get started here real quick. We have a special guest with us tonight, Dean Hibben. He is the son of Samantha and Thomas Hibben. You go, what, 8th grade? Shawnee Middle School? There you go. And we're going to turn it over to him. Travis, you get a better spot than a picture like that.
Sure.
You know, kind of, I need my eyeballs.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, sir. And then turn it over to Mr. Hibben.
I call this meeting to order.
All right. And then we're gonna do something a little new that we haven't ever done before, and this is thanks to Commissioner Flood. Brilliant idea, and I love it. So we're gonna go down front. We're gonna give Mr. Hibben this certificate and get photos down here. So let's go do that real fast. Let's do that first. Let's hold that up. I'll read this so everybody knows what it is.
Pull that mask down there, Bree.
He's smiling, I promise. He's a smiling guy. Let's turn to this way. So I don't think you can. You got it? All right. And then let me borrow that back for 1 second just so we can read this, because this is the first time we've ever done this. You're the first one. So what it says is honorary mayor of the day. This certificate and honors bestowed upon Dean Hibben on this September 27th, and then I've got my signature, which you can stand on your mask. But anyway, congratulations. I hope you had a good time. Thank you so much. Thank you, great idea. All righty. I bet that gets us to our roll call.
Yep.
So we will go to that. So we'll call the roll.
Matthews?
Here.
Weaver?
Here.
Flood?
Here.
Bolt?
Here.
Rutherford?
Here.
Seahorn?
Here.
Salter? We have a quorum.
All righty, thank you so much. Let's see. We have our invocation, and I think Lexi Large with the FCA is going to come up, and the microphone is all yours, and thank you so much for coming.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Fathers, thank you for allowing us to gather here tonight, Lord, and just talk about the beautiful city of Shawnee. Lord, I just continue to pray for this community, God, that you would just continue to have your hand of blessing on it, Lord, and that even in the rising numbers of COVID, God, that you would just protect each individual in here and each individual in the community. And I just pray all of these things in your name. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. Now, if you would join us in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Somehow, I've run out of room. All righty. Okay, item 1 is citizen participation. So, same rules as always, 3 minutes limit per person, 12 minutes per topic. Our city attorney will be our timekeeper, and we will give you a signal if you've run out of time. You probably won't hear from us, but you may make comments later on in commissioner comments. So I think I have 2 names tonight. Lexi, did you sign up to speak? Okay, very good. So first up is Rob Morris. So come on up, Rob. How are you tonight?
Pretty good.
All right, tonight I have a couple things. Last week we had a meeting of the Expo Trust, and I actually would like to say thank you to the interim city manager for what he said at that meeting when the committee voted to give away a whole bunch of stuff on a fictitious list that doesn't even exist yet. But apparently it's all given away, and now we get to create the list. I mean, that was pretty wrong. And then they made a committee afterwards to figure out what it was, even though they had already voted to give it all away. So thank you for doing that. Next, Planning Commission. Why'd they take public comments off the Planning Commission? No vote by the City Commission nor the Planning Commission itself has ever been made. Next, the Lake Committee. Is the Lake Committee public or not? Because it wasn't on the city website, so that means the public's not going to be informed about it or when to go to it or anything else. How about the doubling up, where we have people on multiple committees now, some that will directly affect what comes out of this Lake Committee? I know in the past, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was because of lack of people. However, I'm pretty sure we have plenty of people. Next thing on the list, consent agenda J, I would like to have pulled just for more discussion. 13 and 14 on the agenda. At first glance, I'm hoping this has to do with the homeless situation and enforcing those liens and auctioning off the property after the 6-month limit, since they are only discussion topics tonight. And finally, I didn't have it tonight because I had to add to it because of last week's meeting, but I'm filing a pretty good-sized Attorney General's complaint against this city with everything for the probably past year and a half that I've found here. I've asked that it be done right. I've asked and asked and asked, and it hadn't been done right. So now I'm going to let it go to the Attorney General and see what he thinks, his office thinks about it. And it's really nice to be up here at the podium and not have people looking at you when you're speaking. A resident of this city should have everyone's undivided attention when they're at this podium. I didn't give anybody anything to look at today, and for those of you that were paying attention the whole time, thank you for that. With that, I'm done.
Okay. All righty, next up is Lexi
I'm
Large.
sorry. I'm going to speak. Man, if you give us things that we're supposed to be looking at, I was looking down, taking notes and trying to be intentional so that I could speak to your comments later. So that's why I was not looking directly at you. So.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Commissioner Flood. I appreciate that. I wasn't necessarily speaking directly to you.
Okay.
All righty, next up is Lexi Large.
Well, I'm Lexi Large, and I am the Fellowship of Christian Athletes area representative for all of Pottawatomie County. And so really my journey with FCA was found in hopelessness in my own life as being a college athlete and watching my dad struggle as a coach. And so I see and feel the heartbreak in this community and how these athletes and these coaches need a place to come and share in their struggles and find hope again. And that's my mission and that's my job, is to provide that for them. And so I'm continually going out and meeting with teams. I'm meeting with coaches, providing resources such as 3D coaching, providing resources such as devotionals for the FCA students, games, leadership opportunities. I have a student leader who's on Dale's softball team who is initially taken the next steps to being a greater leader, and that just starts by staying after practice and working with her fellow teammates or encouraging them. We all need to be uplifted, and so that is kind of my mission here in Shawnee, is to continue to facilitate that. I am also just seeking support in every area and aspect, so prayer, financial support, and volunteer. So if you are interested at all in being a part of Fellowship of Christian Athletes in this community, I truly do believe that God is going to do some amazing things here. And so I'm just very thankful to get to share a little bit of my heart, a little bit of FCA's heart, and a little bit about this community's need for this. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 2 is consent agenda.
I'd like to pull an item, please.
All righty,
Item 2C.
2C. All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else got anything you want to pull?
Move to approve the consent agenda minus 2C.
All righty.
I'll second.
All righty, we have a motion and a second to approval of consent agenda minus 2C. We'll call the question. And that passes 6-0, so that gets us to 2C.
Mr. Mayor and members, there was a typo on the lake lease transfer.
Right.
And would like to make a motion to approve the transfer of lot 13 of the Hart Track from James Reed to Adam Balkins. And just wanted to change that number from lot 3 to lot 13, just a simple typo.
Okay, very good. So we've got a motion. And I know
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
And I'll second.
All righty. And Travis. All righty, so we have a motion and a second for approval of item 2C with the change to make that lot 13, which I know we did talk with our city clerk earlier, and the lease is correct. It's just a typo on our agenda. So we have a motion and a second. So we'll call the question. And that passes 6-0. So that should get us to animal control and the pet of the week. Have we got a pet? Do we have a pig this week? It's a puppy. Huh? Are they still out there? There we go. Oh, it is a pretty puppy. Yeah. Wow.
Looks kind of like a pig.
Hello.
How are you?
My name is Brandy. I'm with Shawnee Animal Welfare. We have 2 pets of the week, actually. This one is Bear. He's about 3.5 months old. We think that he is a German Shepherd mix. There is 4 of them at the shelter.
Wow, goodness.
And our second pet of the week is going to be our pig.
All right.
This is Miss Piggy. She's been at the shelter for a little while now. We're not quite sure when she'll be released for adoption or if she will be, but this is her.
All right.
I see why you didn't bring her in.
Really?
She squeals a little bit. Currently at the shelter, we are begging everyone to come in and see if you're looking for an animal. Come in and see if we've got a cat or a dog for you. I bet we do. We currently have 32 dogs, 7 cats, and of course the pig. So recently we've had a lot of dogs that have been dumped at the dog parks and at the shelter. We believe that the economy may have an impact on those animals being dumped with the evictions and whatnot going on. Excuse me. So unfortunately, that is kind of where we're at in our economy right now. So we are doing a fundraiser for the community. It's going to be a bass tournament out at the lake. It's going to be on October 9th at, and I believe we've got some things up here for the board so you guys could see. So the fishing tournament is going to be on October 9th from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's $100 for a 2-person team, the entry. And optional big bass will be $10 per angler. That money will go back into the community. It's not going to go towards the shelter. It's going to go to help animal owners maintain their dogs. So if there's anything that they're needing for their dog, we're going to try to help to make that happen to prevent them from coming into the shelter. Oh, there. And let's see, sorry. We recently have had, since the last meeting, 17 dogs adopted out, 9 cats, and 4 reclaims.
Wow.
Okay, thank you all so
Thank
much.
you very much.
You have a wonderful night.
Okay. We have item 4, which is Mayor's Proclamation POW MIA Recognition Day. So I'm going to come down there, and I'm assuming we've got, I'll bet these ladies up front. And that should be down there. How are you ladies? Doing wonderful. Sure I get the right one. We don't give you the wrong proclamation. That looks like the right one, doesn't it? Come on over here. Come on over here. We'll get right up in the middle. In fact, we'll get in the middle of the two of you. How's that? There we go. You guys read over the shoulder, my shoulders. And keep me in line. All right, so we have POW MIA Recognition Day. Whereas through American history, generations of patriots have bravely served in our military and sacrificed much to protect our country and preserve democracy around the world. And whereas some of those brave men and women who have answered the call to service were captured in conflict and imprisoned by our enemies, some never returned from the battlefield. And whereas our nation remains steadfast in its commitment to leave no service member behind, our men and women in uniform uphold this pledge every day, and our country further upholds it as we honor all those who serve, particularly those taken as prisoners of war or missing in action. And whereas today and every day we pay tribute to the American men and women who have not returned to the country they have so valiantly defended, and we express profound gratitude to those who returned after facing unimaginable hardships, we will never forget the sacrifices they made to keep this nation free. And whereas on this day we honor those Americans who were prisoners of war and recognize them for the courage and determination they show while enduring unspeakable conditions, when we honor those who remain unaccounted for, and especially remember the sacrifices of families who face each day without knowing the fate of the loved ones. And whereas citizens of the city of Shawnee are encouraged to honor all of our servicemen and servicewomen for their courageous and selfless sacrifice, and especially those who have paid so high a price in service of this great nation. Now therefore I, Ed Bolt, Mayor of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, by the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim the 17th day of September 2021 to be POW MIA Recognition Day. So I think this is a really cool thing for our city to do. I cannot imagine what these people have gone through that have been POWs and MIAs that, you know, some of them have been out there for years and years. So thank you ladies very much. I'll give you a minute if you'd like to address the crowd.
Okay.
And I know Susie wants to get photographs, and I'm sure Vicki probably does too. Are you good? Okay. All righty. So I will turn it over to you ladies. And please let them know who you are, because I did not even have your names in the agenda they gave me.
Well, I'm Barbara White. I'm president of the VFW Auxiliary here in Shawnee, Post 1317. We are here to honor, and I also thank the city for doing this proclamation. Also, this is coming, 9/11 is coming up. Mm-hmm. It's 20-year anniversary. Our post will be having an event at 4 o'clock at our post at 4 o'clock. So, and to recognize the 9/11. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Heart of my heart, I'm a 23-year Air Force veteran, and anything we do at the VFW is important. If you're a veteran, even if you're not a member of the VFW, you're welcome to come Saturday. Bring your family. We're going to have horseshoes and cornhole and food, and we're just going to have a good time and remember what happened on 9/11, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you ladies very much. Okay, so now we're going to do Proclamation for Recovery Day, which is September 18th, 2021, and I think we've got a bunch
We're all
of
going to come stand.
There you go. I like that idea. I'm going to hand that back. Just come crowd in. A big crowd. Gateway tonight. All right. Awesome. Hope you guys brought the wide ones, because we got a big group.
Hey.
They're all skinny. All righty. So we will do the proclamation for Recovery Day. Whereas the disease of addiction and substance use disorders could affect any one of us and all communities, with the commitment and support, people can achieve healthy lifestyles and lead rewarding lives in recovery. And whereas through seeking help, those affected can embark on a new path toward improved health and overall wellness, making a healthier community in which to live. And whereas the focus of Recovery Day in Shawnee is to celebrate the journey many have entered in recovery, emphasizing that while the road to recovery may be difficult, the benefits of preventing and overcoming addiction are significant and valuable to individuals, families, and communities. And whereas celebrating Recovery Day in Shawnee spreads the message that behavioral health is an essential part of one's overall wellness, and that prevention works, treatment is effective, and people do recover. And whereas by raising awareness through Recovery Day in Shawnee, we are able to recognize the signs of addiction and mental health disorders, celebrate the wonderful stories of successful recovery in this great city, and honor those who choose recovery. Now therefore, I, Ed Bolt, Mayor of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, by the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim the 18th day of September 2021 to be Recovery Day in the City of Shawnee, and encourage the Shawnee community to celebrate those in our community who have chosen to take the journey of recovery, and support those in need of taking the first step towards choosing a healthy life. Very cool. So I don't know who wants to take this. You want to take that? Yeah. And I'll let you guys, if you'd like to maybe.
Yes, I'm Eliza Carter. I am Gateway's Wellness Director, and we want to invite you to our first annual Walk for Recovery. So that's going to be Saturday the 18th from 10 to 1 at Woodland Park. It is free and fun and family friendly. It'll be a 1 mile walk starting at about 10:15, and then after that we'll have inflatables, Stanton Pace with Bowser's Peace Sanctuary. He'll be doing his spirit carriage rides, free food, yard games, and so it's just going to be a blast. We do have an Expect Hope t-shirt that was designed by Chris Groff, who is local to our community, and it has significant meaning. So you can purchase a t-shirt for yourself for $10. You can purchase a t-shirt and sponsor it for someone else, or if you'd like a shirt and you need it to be sponsored, you can choose that as well. I recommend just going to our Gateway to Prevention and Recovery on our Facebook page, and that will get you in the loop. I will also leave some handouts in the back that take you straight there if you click on the QR code. So who you see up here are Gateway volunteers, Gateway staff, persons in recovery. So we've got a little bit of everybody up here, board members, and that's all I have. Do you have anything, John, our CEO?
I would just say thank you to the city for doing this, because the theme for Recovery Month is recoveries for everyone, and this does require all of us to help with this process, and we're all a piece of this, and so for the city to step up and acknowledge this and see the value of that is enormous, and really appreciate that.
Yep, glad to do it.
And my friend Lauren's going to get a picture. Were you able to get everybody? Oh, you're still there. All right, come in maybe if you can in
Yeah,
a second.
squeeze right in front of me there.
You can do panorama
Squeeze
view.
in.
I'm taller than everybody.
All right, I thought you guys liked each other now. They go, 1, 2, 3. Oh, so good, so good, so good.
I need constant affirmation.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Hey, it's good seeing you, Stan. Take care, buddy. All righty. Well, I bet you're up there for item 5. We have a presentation by Berkeley Young Travel Consultants as to discuss key points of Shawnee travel study. And I know there've been lots of people looking forward to this, so
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, it's my pleasure to introduce a personal friend of mine with whom I've enjoyed a professional relationship for the past about 12 years. I've seen his activities add tremendously to the economic vitality of communities in which he served, and I have ample confidence that what he will tell you tonight will have the same impact here at Shawnee. Berkeley Young is a travel and tourism professional. There's a whole lot more behind his name, but that's, in my mind, his real strength. And tonight he's going to show you what most of us suspect, the strength and vitality of the ability of Shawnee to invite not only visitors, but economic stability and growth. So it's my pleasure to introduce Berkeley Young.
How you doing, Mr. Young?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. It's an honor to be here with you tonight. I have a report to submit from you from a very long study. A little pandemic got in the way. It's a tough time to do visitor research in the middle of a pandemic. And so we started this well last year, working with Stacy and the Visitors Bureau here at Visit Shawnee. So I have a lot of information for you, and I'm going to try to hit the highlights. I have over 30 slides. And so I'm going to try to get through this just hitting the highlights, and there's copies of the report available. So this is my company and where we work around the country, and we look at the visitor economy of destinations. And a lot of people think, well, we're not Hollywood or New York City, we are not a destination, but the fact is you're a destination for business travelers who come here all the day from the companies you have here. You do have gaming visitors. You have people who come here for your expo center, other event facilities. There's a wide range of visitors that come to a community other than just tourists. And sometimes when we say that we're talking about tourism, it can be a misnomer because we're talking about business travelers, group travelers, leisure travelers, and you're on Interstate 40. And so there's an old rule in hotels that you just turn on the sign and you can hit 30% when you're on an interstate highway. And so you have a lot of people that just stop through on the way. So as I've traveled around the country, I've seen a lot in different places. I've done a lot out in the heartland of America, a lot of work. And so I want to talk to you about the methodology that I was hired to do was first to come in and take a look at Shawnee and make sure I understood the product. And in full disclosure, I worked with Shawnee over 10 years ago when Gordana Rowell was your tourism director. And that was before the Grand Casino was here. And so I have some history, and I've worked with Enid and Bartlesville and the Oklahoma City National Memorial. So I have some experience in Oklahoma, but we always come in to make sure we understand the current situation of a market. And then we take a hard look at your lodging market, because the tax on hotels is what funds tourism promotion or visitor promotion. And so we need to understand who's staying in the hotels, what's driving the revenue in the market. Overnight visitors spend 2 to 3 times as much as a day tripper. So we want to make sure we start with who's in the hotels. Then we deployed surveys through social media using online databases. It was an online survey that was made available to visitors as well as residents. We always want to survey residents so that we can understand when you live in a beautiful place like Shawnee, you all know that you have people who stay with you during the year. And so we want to talk to the residents and understand what they say about Shawnee and what their visitors do. And so from that, we've drafted some recommended strategies for you to consider. And first off, I want to say Shawnee is a destination. That this quote, if you build a place people want to visit, you build a place where people want to live. If you build a place where people want to live, you'll build a place where people want to work. If you build a place where people want to work, you'll build a place where business has to be. And if you build a place where business has to be, you'll build a place where people have to visit. So it's all part of the equation. Businesses relocate to places that are attractive places that they would want to live and work and visit. So it all comes together. We pulled data from the state of Oklahoma. The state does county-level economic impact data. And so these are numbers on page 5 from the state economic development analysis of the travel industry. And what we do is, you can see they report visitor spending just shy of $100 million a year in Pottawatomie County. And if we take the taxes generated on that, a little over $9 million in taxes generated on that visitor spending, and we divide it by the households, the 25,000 plus households in the county, it comes down to $353 per household. In other words, visitors coming and spending money, paying taxes, putting money in the coffers is money that your residents don't have to come up with. And so it is tax relief. And then we also showed where you rank in the state compared to other communities of your size and similar makeup. And you can see that you're ranked 22nd in the state of Oklahoma among the different counties in the state. Let's look at the lodging market you have on the right. I'm on page 7. You can see the inventory of your hotels. And in this analysis, we included, you can see since 2011, you've built 2 properties. And we put the Grand in there, even though it's not in the city of Shawnee, so you could see the number of rooms. It's the only full-service hotel in the market. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, because we did not study the Grand. We studied the city of Shawnee hotels, but you can't talk about the city of Shawnee hotels and exclude the Grand, because it is a very big property that affects the whole market. And then in 2020, you added the Fairfield Inn and Suites, which is a good positive sign, but it puts you right under 1,000 rooms generally in the market. So then if we look at what has happened, we pulled information and data from a company called STR, Smith Travel Research. Hotels submit all of their data every night from their front desk system to STR. Anyone can buy that data. So we buy it for your market. And what you see from 2012, your hotels were doing about $10.6 million in revenue in 2012. In 2015, they were doing a little less than 10 million, and then you can see the same has held for 2019. So the revenue, the pot of revenue that is taxed is not growing, therefore the tax revenue is not growing. So right off the bat, that tells us we need a short-term strategy to drive more heads and beds and get more people staying in hotels. More people that stay in hotels eat more meals, do more shopping, do local activities and things. So let's dig in and see what's behind that. And again, this data does not include the Grand. So this is just City of Shawnee hotels. Now it's a little hard to see on the screen, but the top line you see is the supply of rooms in the market. So you take that supply of rooms that was just under 1,000, multiply it by the number of days in the year, and that's your inventory to sell. The bottom line is the room nights that you sold. So supply is the top, the bottom line is demand. So you can see in 2012 where you were, 2013, the Grand opened. And look what happened to the demand for your rooms. Your supply stayed the same. The Grand is outside of your jurisdiction. And you can see the trend continued where the rooms that you lost to the Grand didn't come back. And so even when the Baymont was closed, that's why your supply went down. Your demand stayed low in your hotels. Now, the Grand is built as a casino hotel. Casinos make money off of the casino. The hotel is there just to support the casino. Casinos want their rooms filled with people who are gaming. So I don't think it was a strategy of the Grand to take room nights from you guys. If anything, they do drive rooms in your hotels, but when it's the only full-service hotel in the market, that's what a lot of business travelers and other gravitate toward. And so the Grand in an ideal world would rather have their hotel filled with just people who are gaming. That's the business they're in. So if we look at your annual occupancy trend, the top line here is Shawnee's occupancy in Shawnee hotels, not the Grand. And so you can see prior to the Grand opening, your hotels were running about 72% occupancy. And the national average was down around 60%. And so when the Grand opened, you can see how much the occupancy in your hotels dropped. And then meanwhile, the national average kept growing into the mid to upper 60s. And so your occupancy suffered from the rooms that you lost and didn't replace in your hotels. So we have to have a strategy to recover those room nights for your hotel market to thrive. Now, this is the monthly occupancy going back. This is the 12 months of 2017. I put a red dotted line there for 60% occupancy. Hotels like to be above 60% occupancy. It's when they're performing their best. And you can see your hotels in 2017 for most of the year were above 60%. There were 4 months of the year, and that's typically January, February, November, December. Those are typically the slower months of the year for most hotels. There's 2018, 2019, the pattern is roughly the same. And then, of course, 2020, when nationwide the industry fell off a cliff with the shutdowns. Now, we surveyed your hotels and asked them who's staying in your rooms. So we asked for a prior COVID year, 2019, who was staying in the hotels. And so we know, according to Smith Travel Research, that your hotels sold a total of 121,479 room nights, not at the Grand, just Shawnee hotels. 36% of those were leisure transient, just people passing through, staying here for some reason. And see there where the casino has overflow, they have to book rooms in your hotels when they need rooms. That's what that casino contracted is. Then you can see about a third is business transient, and that honestly should be more in the 40 to 50% range, and that is a lot of business that you lost to the Grand. And then you have group conference meeting. And so overall, it's healthy to have what I would call a third among those three major groups. But we have to work on the days of the week and the times of the year that are slow. And that's January, February, November, December are the slowest by month that we have to work on. So let's look at what when we put our survey out, again, the city helped send it out to citizens. We posted it on social media sites to get resident input. And some of the highlights here, we asked people how long. We had over 415 people answer most of the questions. And so you can see in terms of how long they have been in the area, how many are above 30 years. And so we had a lot of long-term residents answer the survey. And then we said, on average, how many people do you host in your home in a year? And the average was about 11. And so you are a shopping destination. You'll see that. People come here to shop. People come here to do other activities and things. And so there's a lot of your visitor economy that's staying in resident homes. When we asked residents what words would they use to describe Shawnee, you can see, and of course this is a word cloud, where the larger the word means it was said more often, and the smaller the word means it was said less often. And so friendly, growing, small town, and then crime. And so it's not unusual to see this kind of comment among citizens, because usually citizens know these issues related to a town more than others. And then, of course, we always get a kick when people say boring, because I've never seen a town anywhere that, the town where you work and go to school and that kind of stuff, you often think is, well, boring. But we asked people to rate the destination and gave them a list of things and said, rate each of these. Rate Shawnee, and these are your residents, rating Shawnee on these different destination attributes, from excellent to very poor. And so the thing that rated best is Shawnee is a destination for gaming and casinos. Then Shawnee, a place to live, work, and raise a family. Very good rating. A place to retire. A destination for sports tournaments. All good ratings against a 5-point scale, so anything above a 3 is a good rating. And then none of your ratings dip to below 2.5. But you can see at the bottom, active outdoors destination, weekend getaway destination, and a destination for business travelers. That can be challenging because most importantly, the traveling public in general wants to get outside. Anything active outdoor engagement is top with travelers. You look at what Oklahoma City has done with Bricktown and the river they created and all the trail systems, and it's all about active outdoor engagement. But you are a business community with a lot of thriving businesses here, some very large. And so we need to make sure that we are a good destination for business travelers, so we retain those. Then we asked people's satisfaction on the 1 to 5 scale, and you can see they were most satisfied with gaming casinos, public art, painted horses, historic sites, museums, art galleries, and unique local dining. And those are all very important things to excel at, to be a thriving destination. It's interesting to compare on our visitor surveys. We had a little over 600 surveys, but honestly, we were far more successful at getting day trippers than we were overnighters. And you are much more popular as a day trip for shopping and dining from people within the region. We've given you here the visitor profile demographics for the overnight visitors and the day trip visitors. And it's mostly middle America on both counts. Overnight visitors, you can see it's very tightly clustered in the geographic area, as is day trip. And so the maps on the top are pin maps that just show the dots of where the survey respondents came from. The map on the bottom is called a heat map. So highlights of the visitor survey. Digital and social sources for trip planning are mentioned far more so than traditional media. No surprise there, the phone is the top planning tool. That Shawnee has primarily repeat visitors. We need to invite more first-timers, put some message out there. A limited number of first-time visitors indicated a lack of attractors, unique experience to motivate a visit, followed by a need for increased marketing to inspire visitation. So in other words, to get first-time visitors to come, we need a logo, a message, an image that's motivational, that says, why would you come to Shawnee? The Shawnee travel party varies widely from singles to extended family groups. So that means you can appeal to a lot of different types of visitors. Cross-tabulation of the data confirms that university and sporting events are more likely to drive larger family groups. No surprises there. The most frequent day trip visitors are solo or couples, and they're typically coming to shop, and they live in regional counties within the region. The average length of stay was 2.5 nights, but the most frequent response was 1. And so that tells us we have an opportunity. And if you look really deeply into the data, you'll see the numbers are different for Friday and Saturday nights, which means a lot of people come for one night and check out. And we really need to focus on driving 2-night stays on weekends. Most overnight guests stay in paid accommodations, and the Grand, I hit the wrong button, sorry. The Grand was mentioned most often as their favorite place to stay. Events only take place on a few nights out of the 365 nights of the year. So a lot of people say, well, shouldn't events stand out more? Well, again, there's 365 nights in the year. And so going all in with a sellout event for 1 or 2 nights is not going to push the numbers dramatically, especially when you're already hovering at 50 to 60% occupancy with about 800 rooms. Makes sense. An average rating of 4.1 on a scale of 1 to 5, and we said rate your overall satisfaction, is a very good rating. So they like Shawnee. Visitors like coming here. And improvements to the visitor experience will be measured with average ratings above 4.3 in future surveys. So that's where you want to go. When we ask visitors what words they use to describe Shawnee, friendly, native, clean shopping, fun, small shopping. The day trippers, what they said, OBU, friendly shopping. So in other words, you can see that, and you can see down there on the bottom right is crime. Not nearly as prevalent as it is with residents who know more. They read and are more informed. And so it's important to note that when focusing on issues, the visitor's perspective is often different than the residents. And so to always focus on that. We asked people what activities they participated in. And so shopping was the big number one for both overnight and day trip, followed by driving around, sightseeing, taking a nap. Isn't that interesting that we started adding that to our list a few years ago? And people, you know, most hotels have really nice beds and really nice rooms with really big TVs, and a lot of people will check into a hotel just to get a good night's sleep. And then, of course, gaming, casinos, other things. And you do have, for a town your size, a remarkable array of museums and cultural attractions that you offer. And then we gave them a list of attractions. Important to note, we gave them a list of attractions, not venues. Because when you're in a venue like an arena or an expo center, people go for a rodeo. They don't go because it's fun to tour an expo center. And so this is a list of the attractions and the things that they went to. And so you can see Shawnee Mall is a big driver, but keep in mind that you've got most of your hotels out on the highway, out on I-40, with the mall and a lot of retail. And so our challenge is how do we get them downtown? Now, visitor spending, we asked people what they spent their money on when they came. You'll notice a percentage under there for reporting. So in other words, if you look at day trip under gaming and casinos, the average was $205, but only 17% of the people reported spending on casinos. So if you add those up, you won't get the same conclusion. We weight the responses based on the number of people that reported the information. And what you see on average, again, is that an overnight visitor spends 3 times as much as a day tripper, and it just makes sense because that your evening meal is usually the most expensive meal of the day, and then you throw in shopping, etc. So if we take these numbers, STR reports annual room demand in 2019, pre-COVID, of 121,479 room nights sold. So the typical travel party told us they stayed 2 to 2.5 nights. 2.5 nights comes to 48,592 travel parties. The average spending for an overnight travel party while they were here was $940. So your hotels are driving total visitor spending by the time people eat out, shop, do activities, etc., of $45 million. And so little less than half of the total economic impact reported by the state. And then that shows how strong your day trip visitation is. So taking this data and putting together some strategic recommendations, I've given you a population map from the 2010 census. They haven't come out with the 20 map yet. We're waiting on that. But you can see right above Pottawatomie County, there's a little red dot. That is the population center, not geographic center, it's the population center of Oklahoma. So you can see you're almost right smack dab in the middle of the people of Oklahoma between Tulsa and Oklahoma City in a very busy area. So you have tons and tons of potential people right within a close drive that can come visit. And a lot of people like to find a cute little town as a nice little weekend getaway. So if we look, I've put a star on downtown Shawnee. And so there's the interstate highway with the cluster of hotels and mall up at North Harrison. And then you can see straight out to the Grand and Oklahoma City. And your business travelers, remember, have the option that it's not that hard to go over and hit a hotel in Midwest City if they don't like the options that are offered here, or if there's no reason after 5 p.m. to stay, let's just go on over there, and we've got the perception is more choices for dining, etc. So then you have 177, I believe that's right, isn't it, 177?
That's right.
That has the ability to express travelers right past your downtown if you don't have good signage, etc., to lure them in. And interestingly, on my first visit here, I came down Harrison Street, North Harrison, and sailed right past the downtown and was south of town before I realized it. And so signage and gateways within the city make it important for people, for visitors to find what they're looking for. Your downtown looks amazing, has great opportunity to be a very attractive destination, and I encourage you to go all in, making downtown a really dynamic visitor experience. Your airport and expo area over to the university is a big visitor draw. And then, of course, you have North Kickapoo and Harrison that have a lot of cash registers and a lot of money changes hands on those corridors, but then it's connecting all of this to your downtown. And so some of the highlights of your strategic plan is that you can see in the bottom left there that we want to see increased overnight and day trip visitation, longer average length of stay, increased spending per travel party, increased visitor satisfaction, and new travel industry businesses and visitor experiences. And just a simple example of that is an outfitter renting bicycles and other equipment to help people get out of doors and engage. And so the three major things that we want you to focus on is, one, marketing Shawnee as a getaway destination and focusing, having Stacy and her team focus on the slow need periods, which are Sunday, Monday, Tuesday nights, January, February, November, December, etc., to get the hotel's numbers back up. And then welcoming visitors. So the first strategy is bring more people in. The second strategy is, once they're here, make sure you welcome them and advocate for the travel industry as a perceived value of the community, that travelers add value to Shawnee when they come. And then expanding the visitor experience with new activities. And so we've given you some detailed recommendations on each of these in terms of external marketing, with a strong focus on digital and focusing on group sales. We had a meeting at the expo today to talk with them about different potential groups and things that can fill hotels. Then we also hit on some highlights of internal marketing and how to use social and digital and other vehicles to move people around within the city to make sure you get maximum visitor spending. And then also focusing on workforce at the front line, because you've all been there. It's a nationwide issue right now with shortages in restaurants and hotels on frontline hospitality workers. And then expanding the visitor experience. And so downtown Shawnee is a thriving hub of activity, is absolutely critical for residents and visitors alike. Lubbock, Texas, named 5 to 9 p.m. as the magic hours. And it was because they didn't want to talk about nightlife or the perception of being a honky-tonk party town. But 5 to 9 p.m., you have to have entertainment and activities that keep business travelers active, group travelers, and leisure travelers. Improving and add new running, hiking, bicycle path trails. People want to get outside, yes, even in the Oklahoma heat and in the dead of winter. I was up on the upper peninsula of Michigan, where they do fat tire biking all through the winter, people out riding bikes on trails in heavy snow. Encouraging the development of a master plan for Shawnee Twin Lakes. Now, when I was first here, I saw that you had water in the city limits. And anytime you're out in this part of the world and you have water, you have an asset. And so we went out and took a look at the lake, and I'm afraid the perception got out that I was doing a lake study. And I was not. I was just acknowledging the lake is an asset that anytime you have water, as was the experiment in Oklahoma City, you put in a river and you can make Bricktown a destination. And so if you have water, you have something that appeals I am not a lake expert. I am a travel expert, and I can tell you that when you're out in this part of the world and you have water, you have the potential to appeal to visitors. Recruiting outfitters guides, anything to get people outside and active, is always a big seller, and developing winter activities to drive those months of the years that are particularly slow, and encouraging all kinds of new recreation events and new and unique downtown shopping and dining will really put your downtown on the map. And there you have it. That was hitting it fast.
A lot of information, a lot of work.
It's a lot to digest,
Yeah,
and I encourage you all to study on it, and I am at your will to answer any questions that you may have in the future.
Gentlemen, you guys have any questions while we've got him here? I know there's a lot to think about.
I've got one that kind of will dove into a lot more regarding Shawnee Lakes, and I was also under the misunderstanding that you were going to be presenting a more complete recommendation because of you living on a lake, you knowing what a lake could do, and frankly, the time we spent out there, I really felt like we would have some specific recommendations from you. Since we don't, have you got anything in general you can kind of talk about our Shawnee Twin Lakes, and a little bit more broad than the few mentions that you had in this report?
Sure. Well, and the lake, I understand, is your water supply, and so that's your first and most important thing to protect that asset. But as Commissioner Weaver mentioned, I started in the travel industry in Lake Lure, North Carolina, which is just south of Asheville, North Carolina. And the town of Lake Lure owns the lake. They have the deed to the land under the lake, and it's a mostly residential lake with one public beach area. They have a power generating dam that they own. It's a 100-year-old dam. They're getting ready to have to rebuild a new dam. And then they have one resort on the lake, but otherwise 98% of the shoreline of the lake is residential, with a few areas carved out for public access. And through the public beach and marinas, there are boat tours and other activities that generate revenue for the town. And so I would say, I would just encourage the city to look at other towns that own lakes as an asset of the city and investigate what works best for the citizens and whole. But I can tell you, if you have water, you have a tourism asset. Yeah.
We got anything else?
There were, I have recently been to some amazing little cities that one was, went into Wichita Falls, Texas, and rode in a bike race.
Yeah.
And a completely different city, completely different part of the world. But all that to say that race, it brings in an unbelievable amount of dollars to the city. And I know that those are things like that we've tried to do on a much smaller scale. And just as an expert in this field, how do we as a city and how do we as a community take those smaller versions of that and help it grow and foster the growth to become one of those unbelievably huge events that bring in
Great question. And it's always best to start small and grow it, and sometimes I've seen groups try to start too big and overload their barrel, so to speak. And so start small and build it, and remember again that your hotels on many weekends are already above 70% occupancy. And so sometimes you're working hard to bring a group of people in just to displace people who would have stayed there if you had done absolutely nothing. And so it's really partnering, and this came out in our interviews with hotels. They're very eager to talk to city residents, whoever. If somebody's planning an event, ask the hotels and they'll tell you this is when we can really accommodate a group. And if the hotels are slow, it's probably the same for the restaurants, et cetera. And it's an ideal time to host it. And then you'll have a great support network built in to make it successful. But those kind of events are really good for a town.
Anybody got anything else? Nope, I guess we're good. Thank you for all the hard work. I mean, this is really, really good information, and I know
Thank you.
we'll go a lot
And
deeper
and
into
I'll
this.
just say this. I did a study in Enid 11 years ago, and there's honestly, there's not a month that goes by that someone from Eden doesn't call me and ask me questions and we don't discuss the business. And so I'm on your team. I feel like I've now done 2 studies for Shawnee, and so I'm here for you. So please do not hesitate to call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your work. Okay, that gets us to item 6, discussion and consideration of request for the addition of stop signs at West 10th Street and North Eliza Avenue. I believe Seth is up. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. So, as the Mayor just stated, this is a request for the addition of stop signs at 10th and Eliza to create a 4-way stop. If you're familiar with the area, that 10th Street is right there north of the new SCI warehouse. So, as you might imagine, this request originates with South Central Industries in the completion of that warehouse at 217 North Kickapoo. With the completion of the warehouse, business for SCI, they have businesses and warehouses on both sides of the street there, at North 10th Street and South of 10th Street. And with that, there's been an increase of forklift and pedestrian crossings back and forth, which in turn spurred the request for the addition of stop signs. So, and also this portion of 10th Street is one of the busier points of 10th Street with access for people coming from Kickapoo to downtown or City Hall or the courthouse or the community center, et cetera. So Traffic Commission heard this request on August 24th, voted unanimously to move forward with the 4-way stop per staff's recommendation. Staff does recommend approval of the request, and I would hear any questions that you guys have about it.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, thank you,
I'll
sir.
second.
Did I hear a second?
Yeah,
Okay.
second.
All righty. Looks like we didn't have any questions for you. All right, but good job. So let's see, Bob and Daniel. All right, we have a motion, a second for approval of item 6 there. We'll call the question. And that passes 6-0. Item 7, discussion and consideration of request for the addition of stop signs at every intersection on North Park Avenue between West MacArthur and West 37th. And Seth is up again.
I'm here.
Thank you, sir.
So this request originates with a resident, but probably better described as multiple residents along North Park. So my office, Public Works, and the police department have fielded some calls on this over the last several months, but the applicant is actually Mr. William Anastasio. So he's the official applicant, but 13 households along North Park have also signed his petition asking for the addition of stop signs to slow down traffic along North Park. So having looked at this a little bit, and Mr. Anastasio actually even mentions this in his petition that he authored, I think the root issue here is that there's motorists avoiding the light at MacArthur and Kickapoo. Right. So they're turning off onto North Park and running up North Park and then turning left back in to get tied back into Kickapoo. And so with that, the police did some additional patrols out there, but really only wrote 1 citation, and anecdotally didn't really have any change as far as the residents' perception on what was going on out there. So they've authored the petition, and with that said, the request was for 5 intersections to become 4-way stops. I think that's probably a little bit of overkill, given the amount of anecdotal data that we have. So my recommendation was, at least at first, just to do the southern 3 intersections. So that's 32nd, 33rd, and 34th, right there north of MacArthur.
Right.
See if we can stop the motorists skirting that light, just by disincentivizing the speed of it and moving forward with that. So this item was heard also at Traffic Commission on August 24th and voted unanimously to move forward with staff's recommendation. So the three stops that I just laid out, and as I just stated, staff recommends partial approval of the request, and then I would hear any questions or comments that you guys have.
I used to live on Market Street. And Market Street doesn't have any stop signs.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's already one at 36th and Park. Would it make more sense to do the even blocks, 32nd, 34th, so 36th?
Well,
I mean, would we accomplish the same goal without having block stops on every block?
32nd is really probably the most important because it's the first one for first south. So you could probably get by with 32nd and 34th. We could probably accomplish the same goal if that's the direction you'd like to move forward. Really, what I was trying to do was prevent them from getting up to speed, right?
Sure.
So you do that by having more frequent stops.
That makes sense.
And so going from 32nd to 34th, I just feared that they would stop and then get to speed again and then have to stop. So having them further apart, it could accomplish the same goal. But I think, if anything, if you don't want to add three, I think effectively having them at 32nd and 33rd might be more effective than having them at 32nd and 34th.
I know that as I ride with a group of individuals, and we meet at that park and park our vehicles there in the parking lot, and then ride our bikes from there. And
The one on Market.
Excuse me.
The park on Market.
Yes, there that and it's amazing the number of individuals that get a pretty good head of steam heading north on that road, and I agree that 33rd and 34th would slow people down, but it also would keep young folks walking back and forth to that park and give it a greater chance for them to not have to play Frogger and run across there really fast while those cars are coming at them.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the goal is really just to keep the arterial traffic on the arterials and then off of the residential streets. So,
So, did we do a traffic count at all?
we did not do a traffic
I'm curious
count.
how many are going down Market also.
Well, the thing is, if they're using it to skirt the traffic light and they're going north on Market and then they turn west at any point to get back to Kickapoo, they have to go through stop signs at Park. So they're kind of already they're already stopping and disincentivized from doing that. So I think that's why you see it on Park and not necessarily on Market.
Probably folks will have to see the lights red when they get to Park and they turn
Yeah,
over,
my
turn
thought
Yeah.
is that probably, we're gonna end up doing the same thing on Market if we're trying to deter.
Well, that may be true, but at that point, maybe we look at it when we have that problem. I think that we also, like I said, when if they do and they turn on Market and then they turn left on 32nd, they're going to hit a stop sign at Park.
Right.
So they may not do it repetitively because they're not really going to save that much time.
Because they'll get it going back west rather than north. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like to go ahead and add those stop signs on Market as well, since we're being intentional about slowing traffic down in that part of the world?
It would just, I guess, be a motion by you guys. I mean, as far as adding.
The only one that's feasible to me on Market would be 34th, and that's right there at the park. Because otherwise, I mean, it's not four-way traffic everywhere else. It would be a little weird. I'm fine either way. I just knew we already had to stop at 36th, so if we're not adding one at 35th, the evens make more sense. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Cause that light's long.
It is.
I mean, when you get to there, you sit there for a while, I don't know. In busy hours is probably great, but when it's, there's some adjustability on that.
There definitely is some adjustability, and we can look at it and adjust the timing if necessary. But
that may, cause you'll sit there at that intersection 2 or 3 minutes waiting to get through, especially if you're in a turn lane.
It's a busy intersection. Any other questions? Motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve staff's recommendation.
Staff's recommendation. Okay.
I'll second.
Second. All righty. Daniel and Mark. Okay, we have a motion for approval of item 7 for staff's recommendation there. So we will call the question. And that passes 6-0. Item 8 is discussion and consideration of Redbud Property LLC's appeal of an administrative order regarding the demolition of the structure located at 110 West Main Street. I think Joe is up first. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Commissioners, good evening. You have presented to you in your packet a copy of the appeal that was filed on behalf of Redbud Properties LLC. I would point out that the appeal is somewhat void of any factual considerations for this body, simply expresses a general disagreement with the administrative order. Given that, it's my understanding that the managing member of Redbud Properties is present. I think it would be appropriate at this time to allow him to present specific items that he believes are in error in the administrative process, upon which time we'll be prepared to answer with a report from staff.
Okay, that sounds good. You ready? Come on up, Bill.
I apologize. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking of me and what you thought I was asking in my appeal, because what I heard you say and what I thought I was appealing are different. Can you reiterate what you just asked for, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's an administrative order that's been issued by the city seeking the demolition of a specific property owned by Redbud. You've appealed that administrative order, but the appeal itself doesn't state why you believe that the decision was an error. And so this is your opportunity to explain to the
Now
board
I understand.
why
Thank you for
believe-
that. Thank you for that clarification. So basically, it wasn't that there was a problem with the appeal process. It was just that there was no evidence, if you will, presented in the appeal to be considered. Is that correct?
I would say either a procedural defect or something that you believe a decision was made clearly against the weight of the evidence would be
Okay.
what the commission is looking
Okay.
for.
Okay. Let me begin. I need to apologize to the citizens of Shawnee that are obviously here and that are not for the ugliness of the steps that were taken to keep the building from being falling on its own. So to briefly put to your request, I believe that it is in the best interest of not only myself as the owner, but as to the city, that this building be repaired rather than totally demolished. The permit that is still in existence, it's on the last page of the little handout that I provided. That was done in March. Prior to that, you see the engineer report that does a very good job of laying out the steps that are necessary to repair the building rather than to demolish it.
I hate to interrupt. Do you have an extra copy of what you presented to the commission?
Yes, I did. Yeah, would you like one?
Thank you, sir.
So, on the front page is a building outline of my building that is in question at 110, also the two adjacent buildings. That's where the lines are through them. And I'm sorry, I'm not high-tech to be able to put it to where everyone can see it. What the city has asked for is the entire building, what I call the east 50-foot as well as the west 25-foot, be totally demolished to the slab. I have, from the time that I was given the recent notice, I have interviewed had 4 of the wrecking companies that the city uses for total demolish. That was something that I didn't believe was necessary, but I wanted to understand what the city was asking. And so I met with the estimators. They walked through the building. They've got very familiar with what's involved. I do have bids for a total demolish. So I've tried to move the process along. I hope and pray that that is not the decision that the Honorable Mayor and the Commissioners make this evening. The alternative is what was presented in the permit that was approved by the city with the steps outlined in the engineer's report to repair the corner. On that very front page, you'll see in yellow a 20-foot north-south section of wall that is 2-story. So it's 20 foot wide and approximately 27 foot tall. That wall, under the proposal that the contractor is willing to go forward with, the work should be able to be started by the end of October, first part of November. So let's just call it November 1st is the date I'm asking for the work to begin that hasn't already. I've done, and as you'll see in the report from the engineer, the steps that the engineer recommended as well as steps I did on my own to secure the inside of the building are not visible from the outside. Had I not taken those steps, it's likely that that corner would have already ended up in the sidewalk or on Main Street, which would not be in anyone's best interest. So the building has survived the last 18 months through record rains, record ice freezes, winds, and so I think that's evidence that the actions that I have taken as owner have been important. And they've actually been important in that they do prepare the building for the safety of the workers to come in and repair that corner. In the city's information in their report as to why it should be torn down, they put the building as vacant. It's not vacant, it's just, and it's not empty. It has probably in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000 worth of personal and business materials, building materials, tools and equipment that I utilize for my small business that I've been using and running out of these buildings. My goal is to get the property to a place where a new owner can develop it as their business location, or a real estate investor would see the value in it. The way it is now, I was unable to find a buyer. No one wanted to take on the unknowns of the problem, the unknowns of what you guys may ask for. As you know, I've had a chance to visit with several of the folks in the city over the last period of time about what my intentions are and my hope to be able to implement them. In the time of, as the previous travel consultant discussed, when the hotel stays, fell off the cliff, that's the same time period that I've been dealing with as a small business owner to get these things taken care of, marshaling the people to do it, my own financial resources. I have had some personal health issues that have been overcome. And so I now have the time, not my borrowing ability during that time was hindered because of the changes in the economy. My personal economy changed. By the grace of God, I can now, I don't have to borrow the money to fix these problems. I can take care of them financially. I have the time available now to do it, and I have the drive and priority to get it done.
Yeah, any questions from the
Questions?
Yeah.
And I would at some point like to share information about the contractor. I didn't mention, I'm sorry, that he had intended to be here tonight. He has a job in Broken Bow. He works all over the state. I should probably just go ahead and do it now. His name is Jeff Elred from Advantage Masonry. He has over 30 years of masonry experience. He actually was the contractor that has repaired, rejuvenated, and built back better 7 of the buildings in the downtown Ada district. And when I interviewed contractors before I applied for the permit, I specifically selected him because of his ability to work with the older buildings. He's hands-on. He's not a contractor that's, a gazillion-dollar company that sends their crew out, and whoever is running that crew's marshal is the owner of the business, has the experience. And he believes that once it starts, he can get it done within a month, possibly sooner if weather cooperates, crew to 5 to 6 men, lifts to be able to do it safely. Obviously, I'll have to coordinate with the city to make sure that roads are blocked off appropriately for any time that deconstruction starts. As the engineer put in his report, it needs to be deconstructed from the top down and rebuilt from the bottom up, the failed walls. So, yes.
I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
It may be in this report, but I couldn't listen to you and read it at the same time.
Fair enough.
So, how much were the bids to tear down the building? Do you recall?
Well, one thing I've learned, this has been an extremely educating experience to go through. The bids range from 60 to north of 85. However, the bids don't always include everything that it costs. For example, asbestos testing, environmental testing prior to the demolition is required. That is not part of that bid. That is a separate company that does that. They work with people themselves. I have contacted one company and found out a little bit about it just for my own education of the process. My preference, if you do not grant me the opportunity to save what can be saved in the building, would be that the city allow me to marshal my time and my resources to take care of this in coordination, obviously, with the city staff. Rather than having you guys just step in as the city. I understand that there was about $75,000 budgeted for this process on that building. Depending on the additional costs, that may or may not be sufficient. And so my goal by doing it by taking care of what I should have, my wish and my hope was that the problem that was hidden that caused this over decades of the failed part had been identified sooner, and that we wouldn't even be having this discussion in the time. And I, apologize to you guys for having to take the time to listen and make this difficult decision. Commissioner Matthews had a very passionate statement at the end of the last meeting and pointed out the humanization of these buildings that as a city have to sometimes be dealt with, because it is people's lives and dreams. I have failed businesses that have materials in there that I will deal with, and that's, I just need the time to move forward with the partial. That gives me time to process getting out what needs to be gotten out of the building. It's over 10,000 square feet, and it is not empty. Some of it needs to be thrown away and will be. I've already started that process. Some of it needs to be sold. Some of it needs to be donated. So I just ask for the mercy.
As I said when you and I visited, I probably had more complaints on that building than anything since I've been on the commission. And I know you understand that. You've already made some measures of change, but
yes,
you explained, and I know you talked to several of us, your situation as to what occurred, not only during the pandemic, but financial difficulties and the fact that you're there now. I'll just say that I'd hate to see us, if there's not a way to work with you, and I don't know how the commission will feel, but I'd hate to see us have another hole downtown if it can be repaired. And I guess my next question would be, you said you've gotten bids for repair. Can you share some of those numbers as to what it's going to take to get it stable and improved and satisfactory?
I met with and asked for them to give me their professional advice on, number one, can this building be saved? And all the answers were yes, just like the engineer said. I had a range of, for the deconstruction of the part that has failed, along with the reconstruction to make it a sound building, they range from the neighborhood of $40,000 to $125,000. And partly mainly the experience of the contractor that is on the current building permit through the city. Made that selection because of his passion for saving the older buildings and his experience in doing it. So.
That's what I want here.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And, they may initially be asked to you, but they may need to filter through Joe, simply because I appreciate and I take very seriously the humanization we talked about. I get that very much. I also don't know many others that, this first came before the city, in 2019.
Yes, sir.
When that's the first administrative order, which means we were dealing with it long before that. And we haven't made progress, and I understand stuff happens. But, I mean, I have other questions for Joe later, but you mentioned you have the financial capability now to take care of it.
Yes, sir.
I don't know that this is legal, so Joe can filter this for us. But sometimes you have to put your money where your mouth is. If it is legal and acceptable, let's say you said the top amount of $125,000. Could you put $125,000 in escrow tomorrow?
Would I put 125 what?
In escrow? Like you say you have the money, if you want us to, like,
if it's legal.
At some point, with this been going on for over almost coming on 3 years or 2 years.
Yes, sir.
At some point, we would have to say, okay, can you demonstrate that you have the capability? Because what I see is a permit filed in March, and there's been no real action taken on the 10 action items.
Right, and that was, again, that's on my shoulders. Because of the pandemic hit me.
Sure, no, and I totally respect that. What I'm saying is,
so the contractor was ready to go. The parts I needed to do before he could get ready to go, I was unable to do.
Sure.
I am now able to do those. To answer your previous question, I think 125 is a little high for the project. Sure. So some acceptable number, I absolutely am willing to do that. But the language needs to be such that both parties understand the scope of it. It needs to be legal.
I'm not saying that you and I are. You're saying yes.
No. That's
what I'm saying is
creative solutions are welcome.
If you wanted us to rule in your favor in an appeal, could there be one of those conditions? For me, would be you'd have to demonstrate the capability to do what you say you're going to do.
Yes, sir.
And we can figure out some of the. Perhaps the details need to be worked out, but. Or maybe Joe says, no, that's not even a possibility, but.
Well, and for example, if it does, God forbid, go to a total demolition and I am allowed to take care of it, all of the demolition companies say you pay us when it's done. They don't require an escrow or an upfront deposit, anything of that nature. But to the end of, you've very well stated, put your money where your mouth is. I think that's a very creative and a good idea. If it can be, done that's acceptable to all the parties.
My other question, and this is my own personal, for the time I was on the planning commission, I was going to, at the time, Director Blaine, and I have great frustration with your pallet fence.
It's gone. If you haven't been by in the last 2 weeks, you haven't seen that it's gone.
I went by today.
There's pallets on the sidewalk.
Yeah, but another condition that I would want an actual fence that keeps people out of it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what the standard and safety regulations are, and maybe the city staff can speak to that later, but what has been there certainly is not protecting the public.
Sure. Well, what happened initially was when the 19, which was the last real Shawnee nighttime Christmas parade, was approaching, I was notified by the city and was asked to hire a structural engineer, which I did, to give the city the assurances that this was not an imminent implosion that was going to, hurt the safety of the community. Absolutely willing to do that and did all that. At that point, the city traffic department provided the flashers to make that barricade. Over time, that pallet, you guys needed the flashers back to go other places. I, in getting creative, got the pallets to make a barrier to keep that measure of safety, but moved it back in. I later moved it in, and then about 2 weeks plus minus ago, left what's on the sidewalk there because the supports in the front, obviously the pallet wall's ugly, and again, my apologies. It does not give the beautiful city that our Shawnee Visitors Bureau wants to present and that we want to present. But those are going to be there. Those metal supports will be there until the fix, if allowed, is done, and that should be before the end of the year easily, because that is what provides the safety for the workers. The fence and, a construction fence, some other type of fencing is absolutely doable. Just need to understand what that is so I can meet that expectation.
So time frame, you're saying by the end of the year? I mean, to me, that's probably, for 2 years, we've had really not much activity.
That's been seen, yes. I've had a lot of activity. It's just not visible in the front.
But, the safety hazard on the outside hadn't been addressed other than just the supports there.
Mm-hmm.
So, my take on it would be if we decided to say, hey, by December 1, we need to be done, or whatever date we set forth, on my side, if stuff doesn't start happening pretty quick, you can't get there.
Right.
And then the other side of it is if we draw a line in the sand, and I don't know, on the legal aspect, if we say, hey, it's got to be done by such and such date, if you spend all this investment to get there, and we go past that date, at that point, we tear it down. It's kind of a win-win deal on our end. If you can fix the building, the city's not going to have to spend $75,000 to take the building down.
Correct.
Or whatever it is, 150, or, if it's got asbestos in it. So it's a win for us, and it's a win for the city of Shawnee to have a building back to where we can utilize, a business can go in there and generate revenue. But I don't want to see you get $50,000 into this and go, I can't get there. And then come with the sympathy of us to go, it's going to take me another 6 months. And we're tired of the 6 months already, of looking at it. So that's the risk that you have, is we're going to hold your feet in the fire if we do move away from taking it down right now.
Right, and there's going to be some things that are beyond everyone's control that could, the reason I say the end of the year, whether the whatever the next version of the pandemic is, locks it down where workers can't get there, but that's going to impact your all's ability as well as my ability to do it. I'd like to think that we're coming through a lot of these things that have been making 2020 one of the most challenging years in my lifetime, and in many others. And 2021 is, trying to play catch up, and I'm there now.
Do you have an estimate on a timeline to get the front stable and safe where that sidewalk, because I'm like Commissioner Weaver, that's been a pretty good topic for several years, and
my goal
it's gone on for
Well, it'll be 2 years.
Yeah. So
in December,
in your mind, what would be a reasonable timeline if granted some sort of an extension to have that structurally sound and safe and everything off the sidewalk?
Work started in 60 days and completed in 90 on the repair part of it.
So that's
Which puts me a little past the November 1st date. We're at, September 7th. I understand the importance of the action and not just words and promises, absolutely. But
Christmas parade is...
Well, traditionally, that's the first Thursday in December, which would be the 2nd of December this year.
Which is 90 days from today.
now, as of right now, that's one of the things I've researched this week, and maybe you guys could speak to that, not just for my benefit, but the community's. Right now, when you go to the website, there is nothing on the calendar for a Christmas parade. The only thing you can find when you Google it is what happened last year when it was changed to the light thing that was on the 3rd. So what do you guys know what the intentions are for the parade this year?
Well, that's not a city event.
It's a
put
CEF
on by
event.
CEF.
Yeah, and I went to their...
They have always held that the first Thursday in December, which would be the 2nd of December this year. So
And so to that end, I think in just in talking to some of the city folks along the way in the last couple of weeks, that would be my goal, would be to have those, to have the sidewalk clear by then. So, you know, it's just a matter of how quickly it can start, and
The dialogue between you and the city, you know, I think has been poor. Just the city contacting you probably and going, hey, we got to get something done.
other
Is what I
than the
presume.
official notices, the only phone call I received was in November of 2019. The only phone call I received to say, hey, how's it going? What's the holdup? What the heck's going on? Why haven't you started? And I understand the staff is completely overworked and overwhelmed because of the amount of work that they're doing. I've watched the last couple of commission meetings and, you know, seen the marshal's load that these guys are carrying and doing. And so, yeah.
So can we tie updates to the project if he does do this, to where he has to communicate with what's going on?
Yeah, none of the suggestions that I've heard from the commission so far would be unattainable. So we could tie updates. We could probably, given a little bit of runway, do some form of an escrow agreement. Certainly put hard and fast deadlines on there. But before those decisions are made, because this new information has been brought up, I would like for Mr. Moore to be given the opportunity to give a brief presentation to the commission with regard to the history of this project.
I'd like to hear from staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in 2019, Mr. Ludi, engineer director that was here at the time, knew the representative, so we did contact him, and we went to the property with engineers, and you can see from the slideshow. On the slideshow, you can see we gained access, and if you look on that picture, you can see it actually doesn't have a roof on one side of that building. Most of it has holes in it, or it's missing the roof. It's not just the front of it. If you continue to the next slide, you'll see that once we got inside, you could see where the wall was felling. You can see it's bowing out there in November of 2019. That's where it's felling right there. It used to be a auto sales business back in the 70s, and they cut out that hole to transfer the cars through. And that's what we determined was causing the failure with the roof leaking, is where it started. And as he contested, I go out there every storm we have and I check it. And as you go through these pictures, you can see we went from just that crack on the east side that the front started cracking on the windows through the years as we go, the months as we start moving through this. At the time of November 2019, they did give us a plan of how to fix it. After that, we did not hear from them again once COVID started. So we did approach it in December of 2020 that, hey, we have to do something. And at that time, Mrs. Blaine gave the recommendation he had to get a permit and be done by this month of 2021. He got a permit in March, told us that his contractor would start work within a month, and nothing has ever happened. And that's where we are now. He has been out there, he has moved some of the pallets and put up the fence that we have going right now, a caution fence, but we're still blocking the ADA. We still have rain going into where the glass is. That's where the roof has holes all in it, and it's in the very back, it has no roof on it out the alley. If you look where that white door is, that's where the window was, and that crack gets bigger and bigger as we go. That crack was not there when we first began this.
It looks like the front facade's moved 4 or 5 inches off that second story.
That is correct.
So March of 21 is when he got the permit, or March of 20?
March of 20. Or, no, March of 21, you're correct, on 21. So his 6 months is up right now. So our permits are good for 6 months by state law and international building code, and we can extend it one time if we see work progressing. At this time, there hasn't been any work on the outside that we can see, and I have not been inside, so I couldn't tell you if he's done anything on the inside, but on the outside, I haven't seen anything change.
So I guess as a commission, we just make a decision whether we want to let him try to save it in a timely manner or tear it down and move on.
That's correct, Commissioner. I would say, though, this is an appeal of an administrative order. This was the evidence that the city had at the time that decision was made. The evidence that's been brought tonight is new evidence. Certainly, it's up to you guys whether you consider that or not. But based upon the fact that that evidence was not produced at the time of the original administrative hearing, procedurally, we would object to you considering it, and staff's recommendation would remain for the immediate demolition of the building.
So, if we, now I'm confused.
Me too.
Me too. Well, maybe let me try and backtrack that a little bit. So, I got legal on you, and I apologize. I should have issued a warning first. There is an opportunity to be heard at these administrative hearings, and these appeals are to come to you guys to consider the evidence to make a determination as to whether or not the administrative decision was correct, given the evidence that was put forth at that time. That is not always the way it has functioned, admittedly, because we typically have situations where the property owners or representatives of the property owners will come and avail themselves to the commission's discretion, which is what's occurred tonight. But technically speaking, because this evidence was not put forth at the time of the administrative hearing, as the city attorney, I would ask that you not consider what's been put forth by Redbud Properties tonight. You have in your ability the discretion to do so and to provide within the lines or completely different than what have been discussed parameters by which an extension of time can be granted. But for the reasons that have been laid out by Mr. Moore and the evidence that I believe is somewhat irrefutable as to the lack of progress, in fact, the further deterioration of this property over the past 2 years and the safety hazards that it poses to the public, that we would recommend that it be that the administrative order be upheld and that it be subject to demolition as soon as possible. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question regarding city's liability.
Yeah.
We've known, I mean, from the administrative order from 11/26, then what, December 2020, now this last one. What liability do we hold should an incident, should the building fall down tomorrow, land on a group of people passing by? The fact that we've known the condition of the building and not moved on it.
I want to be very careful here not to breach attorney-client privilege or to create a pathway to liability, but I have significant concerns if we were to not follow through with the upholding the administrative order.
I guess I would ask and say both, that I think we can agree that Kevin and his department has done everything by the law, has followed all the steps, has gone through all the legal proceedings that should be up to this point. And I think we can understand that you did everything absolutely correct. But I think we can also understand that Mr. Warmaker has put himself in a position of apologizing, laying out his situation for maybe not responding to that administrative hearing and not having the resources to do what he should have done. But now he's come to us with the assurance that he has the funds, that I don't want to go against the recommendation of our city attorney. I don't want to do that, particularly if we're talking about a liability that we might have from the city. But I also want to be fair that somebody who, I don't want to say has been in hardship, I wouldn't say that's the right word, but hasn't had the ability to take care of what he should have taken care of and what we required that he do. I don't want to sit up here and if we have any way of keeping from tearing down the building that will become a hole in the wall that will be a liability either to him individually or us as the city to tear it down. If we have just any opportunity at all to show grace and to show an opportunity to work with him, that's what I would hope we can do. If you're saying that we're not even allowed to do that, I guess I need to hear that from you, but if you're saying that there is an opening for us to give him time, and we trust in him, and if we can vote as a majority to agree to let him do the things he said he would do, I'd like to know that we have the opportunity to do that.
Certainly, I think that's well stated, Commissioner Weaver. Obviously, the system as it's set up in our code of ordinances allows you that discretion. That is precisely why this group is hearing this tonight, because Kevin and I's job to some degree is very easy because we take the letter of the law and we apply it. But there is a mechanism by which this group can exercise a degree of discretion for the very reasons that I think you've artfully articulated here this evening. There are risks inherent in everything we do, and I know I'm not telling anyone up here anything that they don't know. It is simply a question of mitigating that risk to the fullest extent possible if a decision were to be made by this body to do something other than to call for its demolition. And certainly if that was what Mr. Moore and myself were tasked to do, we would utilize every resource available to us to put forth the most risk-averse plan that we possibly could to carry out the will of the commission.
Mayor, Commissioners, in my previous assignment here as your interim city manager, you identified, and your predecessors identified 2 buildings in town that were your first priorities. This is one of them.
Yep.
We're not without heart or sympathy, but it might surprise you to learn that there are over $840,000 worth of city liens on existing properties just like this. And the same excuses, the same reasons were presented to those properties. That building continues to deteriorate. The pictures show you that it has. And while I respect Mr. Wormke's passion, and I'm quite confident that he is indeed sincere, but that building's coming down, and it might not be on your terms.
That crack that runs through the front of it that I see growing in these pictures is really concerns me when I look at that.
Our legal obligation at this point, the way the agenda item is written, is to decide yes or no on the appeal of the administrative order.
That's correct.
May I ask for a point of order?
That's up to the meeting chair.
Well, what do you want to do, Mr. Warner?
Well, what I want to do is this goes partly to your statement before I was asked to speak about the order and the specificity of it and the law. I was told in that administrative hearing that the officer was instructed by someone within the city that there was nothing I could say, do, or present to change the city's desire to put this building down. So, and I believe there is a recording of that meeting.
The recommendation was that we need to demo it. We've given you enough time for 2 years, and the order is that we need to
And so I believe that this opportunity before the city commissioner and everyone else was my opportunity to present the evidence. I was not told that I needed to have all of that available then.
Okay. And I think whether that statement is true or not, that evidence has been produced to the commission, which is going to be ultimately the deciding body with regard to this property.
Does this decision need to be made tonight, or can it be deferred for 2 weeks so we have time to try to sort some things out? That would be the other thing I would offer.
That would be up to the will of the commission.
Yeah, I mean, that's a motion we can always make.
So if we approve the appeal then there's no decision after that. That's saying to move forward with the demolition.
Correct.
If we voted to deny the appeal or uphold the appeal,
Reverse the administrative decision.
that's a legal decision.
Correct.
Then we can follow that with a further recommendation. So, or does that have to be done at a later date?
I mean, if you did nothing but grant the appeal, which would reverse the decision, then staff would go back and address the situation accordingly, which I would suggest at this point would be very close supervision of the project, requiring the issuance of a new permit based upon the expiration. There would be several other processes, but it would likely result in an immediate filing of a new administrative process.
And that's a 6 month?
6 month, that's what I was thinking.
Did you say permits are for 6 months?
Permits are good for 6 months, but you guys can put administrative orders on it that be checked weekly, monthly, however you would like to do it, so that we know that progress is getting done, because.
Okay, so we do have that option.
And yes, absolutely, and I would suggest you make it as part of a motion to essentially grant the appeal so that it's put together and clean. But I would have the commission keep in mind when formulating any alternatives that there was a previous 1 year completion that was a directive from the administrative order which has expired. And so that, I don't want you guys to get bogged down unnecessarily, certainly your prerogative, but a permit being, I mean, he could have pulled the permit a year ago, they could have pulled the permit yesterday. It didn't change the deadline by which the work was to be completed pursuant to that administrative order. And so just because a permit may or may not have expired doesn't mean that it supersedes that previous administrative order or any other order that you guys would put forth as a result of this appeal.
I have a hard time taking it down. I mean, I think you give the guy the benefit of the doubt, give him 90 days. I mean, if we tear it down tomorrow versus tear it down December 1st, the cost the city's incurring is basically the same. I know the buildings, yeah, I guess the other thing, the roof isn't on it. I presume you're planning on repairing it.
Repairing or removing, I mean, there's a whole process of this that will take time and attention and effort and cooperation and communication. I'm not an attorney, and I respect city attorney's advice and direction. However, it is a point that, you could have gotten the work done, but you would have had a permit to do it. I've had a year to do it. I haven't had a permit for a year. I've had a permit for less than 6 months. And yes, it was delayed in coming for the reasons that previously discussed. But obviously the measures I've taken have kept a liability from being acted upon because of failure. And yes, the crap is getting bigger, and yes, it does need to be taken care of soon. And whether I was here and taking care of this through this venue or this venue never happened, I'd still be taking care of the building because of my own liability that is out there from the problems. So I want to do what I can the best way I can, but I don't want to have a lot of administrative things that take everybody's time and attention away from getting the work done. We need to simply get the work done as seamlessly and reasonably as possible.
Well, that whole block is, the building across the street doesn't have a roof on it. All the walls are off of just the outside skeleton standing. I mean, we'll let that happen. And, at some point that needs to be addressed. I mean, it's where do we stop? I mean, we know this is a hazard. The other building's not a hazard because it still has metal structure up holding, I mean, it's structurally sound, just doesn't have a roof on it, it's just a slab and walls. So, I don't know.
My fear is something's gonna happen to it, and if I hate to see a building come down, I hate to see something happen. But also, if we move forward and granted 60 days or 90 days, and there's not significant progress made, we're gonna be right back here. A lot of money's gonna be spent, and we're gonna be forced into the same scenario, and by looking at the pictures, and I'm not an engineer, but that looks like a bigger project than
60 days.
Yes.
So,
that much money.
and that kind of gets the question I wanted to ask you, Kevin, was the plan that the engineer has submitted, I mean, is that, can you judge that? I mean, is that going to work?
I would have to look at that engineer report from 2019. They did say dismantle it and move the building back. So that was the thing, get it back, I think, 20 feet, 30 feet to get it back to structure sound walls. I haven't been in it to see if it has got worse on the inside farther back, but that was the recommendation from Landy's Engineering and Shannon, what's your last one?
Tarkington.
That was the structure.
That report is actually from March of this year, not from 2019. His inspections began in 2019, so just like your report with your recommendations were for that entire time frame, so was the engineers. They've had 3, Steve Landis has had 3 on-site inspections.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, might you indulge a suggestion? In speaking with Mr. Moore, it appears that a conservative time estimate to have the building demolished would be about 6 months. Perhaps the commission would entertain upholding the administrative order, but giving Mr. Moore and I the green light to continue negotiations with Redbud Properties with regard to indemnifying the city and moving forward in a timely and aggressive manner within that 6-month time frame. That way we don't have to start all the way back over if they're unable to get that accomplished.
Right.
But we can still give, as I think Commissioner Weaver aptly put, some level of grace to try and work within those time constraints and protect the city.
If Mr. Warmker can get things resolved in the interim, then that takes care of that.
That was going to be one of my thoughts. From a legal perspective, I don't find the administrative order defective.
That was what I was trying, I don't feel like it's defective, so how do we?
So, but could we defer the item? Would that
What would be the
accomplish?
correct procedure for what?
Yeah,
It would be my request that the commission make a determination to uphold the administrative order this evening. I think we've said that a few times, so I'll quit beating that dead horse, but that would be our request. But in the interim, understanding that it will take some time to accomplish demolition.
Right.
Mr. Moore and I could continue to work with Redbud Properties and bring back in writing to this commission for approval a concrete plan that provides indemnification to the city and provides concrete timelines and concrete dollar figures so that there are benchmarks that you guys can base that decision off of. And then ultimately at that point, if those benchmarks aren't reached,
We just move
then
forward.
the property will unfortunately have to come down.
So what's the legal vehicle?
Well, let me get
If
the
we-
time frame real fast.
Sure.
If you gave him a demo permit, you say he can demo it. That permit's good for 6 months unless you give him a timeline saying it's 1 month. If we demo it, tomorrow we will start having bids on it and go forward after it. We already have done asbestos, we just did the whole calculation of the building. So if you gave him a permit to demo, he would have 6 months to demo it. If we do it, we'll do it within a month to a month and a half is where we're at with that. It's the same thing if you give him a remodel permit, continue to remodel it 6 months without you giving timelines. But my recommendation was either way we go, besides us demoing it, is timelines. We need timelines pit against this so he knows this is your timeline, this is when it needs to be done. If not, the city will demo the property.
And Mr. Warmker has made that offer to deal with that himself, so I'm assuming that that offer is still good and that he would rather have the 6 months than a month and a half.
My question is the legal vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
If we uphold the order tonight, how do we get to, let's say you and Mr. Wormker come to an agreement,
How do you put the brakes
how do we
on?
get to putting the brakes on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've already upheld the order. Which I don't
If
think,
we
which I
up-
don't think is
If we uphold
defective.
the order, then the city has permission to demo it.
Correct, but Redbird Properties also has the ability to pull a permit to demo it themselves.
And then the question, I think, is how do we stop that let's say he's able to get this done, within that 6 months. Let's say he gets it done in 4 months somehow. How do we stop the demolition order? I think they're just asking, we're
There's a
probably
significant-
failing miserably at asking a legal
No,
question.
I don't think you are. I just think there's so much speculation associated with that. What I'm asking for is a degree of certainty by upholding the administrative order, and then there are several paths or mechanisms by which we can modify or change that decision going forward if we're able to satisfy the commission with regard to agreements that can be reached.
Mm-hmm.
So will that require Mr. Warmaker to immediately get a demolition permit, or the city would put it in an order to tear down? Would he be required to actually apply for a demolition permit now as opposed to another remodel permit to have the 6 months to do the work?
That would be my position, that absent a demolition permit, that the city at this point, if the commission upholds the administrative order and there is no demolition permit pulled by the property owner in very short order, that the city would be required to proceed forward.
We normally do in our administrative hearing 48 hours. You have 48 hours to give it. So when we do it on Thursday, we actually give them the weekend, but we give them business days. 48 hours from this date, you have to be in. So Monday, if we do theirs at 9 o'clock, Monday, 9 o'clock, you have to have a demo permit on my desk.
So can he apply for a demolition permit and the remodel permit at the same time? Since he's gonna obviously have to deal with his contractors to let them know whether or not they're gonna have the opportunity to work on the project.
Commissioner Weaver, I would suggest that probably a more proper order would be to apply for the demolition permit and then obtain that information, bring a proposal to the city, allow Mr. Moore and myself to vet that proposal, put it in writing, bring it back to you guys, and then a decision can be made as to withdraw the demolition permit and go forward with a remodel permit.
So we have a meeting in roughly 2 weeks. So is that a reasonable time frame to have that back to us?
I think that that's pushing it, quite frankly, Mayor. A lot of that would depend on just how quickly Redbird Properties could submit firm numbers back to us.
Mayor, Commissioners, I asked Mr. Worm to provide tonight a binding contract that he had acquired from a source that would show his intent and his level of desire to correct this problem. I was very clear about that and said it was probably the only way he could turn the tide against demolition. Now, frankly, he hasn't provided that. And I respect his stance and I am very sympathetic. But the next time you ask us to make somebody pay a fine for not knowing their grass, I want you to remember that this was your first priority.
I've been asked by the city to totally demolish the building, and you're asking me to go to a contractor that might not have that opportunity and have him take the time to put a contract in writing for work that's not gonna happen if it's totally demolished. Those two things are they're opposing each other. This thing is just swirling. It needs to get fixed, it needs to be taken care of. And I agree that obviously I have to bear the responsibility for not doing what I said I could do. But when you guys start stacking all these requirements on and want in 48 hours to have a demolition permit, do you guys want to look at what has to go on a demolition permit to be filled out? The contractor's name and license number. I've talked to 4 of them, so in 48 hours, I'm supposed to talk to them,
talk to their owners and have them commit to a time frame. This stuff does take time. It was already said, you can't get the building demolished by the city within 6 months. News tonight.
No, that is how long a permit is good for. We can have it demolished within a month.
Right. And that was my understanding.
If I gave him the opportunity, it would be 6 months.
Right.
Before he would have to have it cleared.
Right.
Unless you're getting him a time.
Your costs will be much higher because they're also going to be having to take on all the things that I own that are in the building, not just the building. So your costs are, that $75,000 ain't gonna cut it at that time frame.
Okay, I think we're at the point where we need to move on. Has anybody got any other questions for Joe or for Kevin?
Yes, but I don't know how to ask them.
Well, just try. We'll figure it out.
Is it possible for me to pull up a new permit to rebuild it as well as a permit to demolish it? And at the end of that 6 months, if it's not rebuilt, it's demolished with everything in place to happen?
Okay, I think we asked that question, and they told us that you would do the demolition one first, and then have to.
There's no legal prohibition to him
Okay.
applying for 2 permits.
Right.
Those could be issued, but it would be at obvious and significant risk.
And I don't think we said that it had to be done within 48 hours, but we expect it to be done very quickly, because, I was asking if you could get it to the next meeting, and that's probably not the case, but it would be the first meeting in October, which I really hate for it to go that long. I don't really want to prolong this thing. I mean, these are always a very painful process, and
It's been going for a long time.
For a long time.
I'm very sympathetic.
Absolutely.
It's.
Been a long time.
I'm not an engineer, so I won't.
Yeah, can't.
I think what the mayor said is right. This is the most painful part of my experience up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're in this situation because of Redbird Properties, not because of Mr. Moore or Mr. Vondran. The administrative order happened in 2019, and we've been going through this process, and there's been no urgency until the administrative order of August 10th or 12th, I forget which it was. Now they're urgent about it. And quite frankly, the order is not defective. And so while this is just not a fun spot. I mean, if Mr. Vondran can find an agreement and we can find a way forward, that's great. But frankly, I don't see the order as defective.
Yeah, if the order's not defective.
And I think we need to make clear to people that will be in this situation in the future, the time to become passionate about restoring your building is when the administrative process begins, not after the order's issued.
So my question that I had a minute ago, so if the motion is upheld by this commission, then you all will work with Mr. Warmaker if he applies for a demolition permit and a remodel permit, and then he can proceed with his attempts to repair, get his contractors, negotiate with you for acceptable terms, whether that be proof of finances, contracts in place. You still will have the authority, the two of you will have the authority to allow him then to not have to do the demolition and move directly into the permit for reconstruction, or will that come back to this commission for the opportunity to address this again?
I think in conjunction with the city manager, we would have authority to do a lot of what you just said. I think given the sensitivity of this situation, that we would likely bring that back before the commission.
So then we would have to decide whether he's made significant progress or enough progress to.
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that. I think just because I suspect for the city to have comfort, given the length of time that this has proceeded, promises that have been made and maybe justifiably so not kept, but for whatever reason. And again, I'm not getting into that, but I think that we would need to have whatever the terms in the agreement reduced to writing in a very formal format And that is why I think it would ultimately come back to this body. Now, as far as the discretion and staff recommendations and Mr. Moore and myself being able to look at it and say, yes, this will work, this protects the city, this gets it done in a timely manner, we'll be able to do that, and we'll do so in as accommodating a fashion as we could to Redbird Properties, which is what Mr. Moore does every day of his life.
Absolutely.
With everyone that comes in, whether it's in a good situation or a bad situation. And so if we can save a building, great, we'll do what we can to save the building. But at this point, it's going to take some significant and swift action on the part of the property owner, because we've gone 2 years without any noticeable improvement.
But that opportunity is still there if they choose to take that action.
He mobilizes contractors with appropriate permits tomorrow. We're probably not going to bring in bulldozers, right?
Right, absolutely.
I mean, there's a degree of common sense associated with this,
Absolutely.
for sure. But it's that type of urgency that I think is required at this stage.
That sounds like the best plan forward to me.
So I guess, do you understand what we're saying?
Honestly, I'm feeling very overwhelmed. To answer your question, I understand a lot of it, most of it, but we've talked about it for so many directions that I don't know that I have full clarity.
If we uphold the administrative order, which there's no, I don't see the evidence to not, what is our next option in that possible motion?
Commissioner Rutherford, I would treat that as Mr. Moore alluded to, it's treated with anyone else who doesn't appeal, right? So upon affirmation of the order tonight, in my mind, that would trigger the same 48-hour window that everyone who is subject to one of these administrative orders it receives. I understand the concerns with regard to the application for that permit, but I have been involved with not maybe 10% of what Mr. Moore has, but I've been involved with enough of these. Many people get it accomplished within that 48-hour window. And there are times where people bring in partial permits and their check and say, you know, the contractor will be on it later. It's effort, it's communication, it's the things we haven't seen to date.
I don't require the releases immediately. I can have a contractor on it and them signed it. And when it's on my desk, I wait until I get every release from OG&E, ONG, the phone company, our water department. Then we move forward. I don't have to have that immediately on that application at that moment.
It's 48-hour submission, not 48-hour approval.
So he just has to submit, even if it's a partial application.
There also needs to come a hard timeline with that for significant improvement and completion. And if that's not to, I don't know, to whose satisfaction that has to be met, but if there's $50,000 spent and it's still not done and it's still in this kind of shape or not much better, it's still going to have to happen. So we need a timeline that I think is pretty short. But does give opportunity.
So let me understand. So he's gonna get a demolition permit and then submit it partially if he doesn't have it, everything. So you guys will turn electricity, shut off all the utilities to it.
Yes.
And then he needs to bring something from a contractor on the reconstruction of the front wall.
If that's the direction you guys are liking to go.
So in a timely manner, meaning in the next week or two, and then with some kind of start, finish date from the contractor.
We already have he already has a document that states when that contractor can start, he said, but he's saying October, the end of October. So it would have to be,
With 30 days for completion if weather permitting it takes.
Which put it early December.
Yep.
But there's other considerations that I think have been alluded to tonight with regard to the safety, proper fencing, construction fencing, things of that nature that can be accomplished much quicker and would necessarily need to be a part of any timeline that would be agreed to.
That would be.
Would be.
Yes.
Absolutely, from the city standpoint. We have to ensure the safety of the public
Right.
immediately.
If there's no fencing, no indemnification of the city, and no escrow, I'm not interested.
Understood.
It needs to be safe because it's not safe right now. So is the building secure? I'm asking, is the building secure as far as entry into it? Is the building secure?
You're okay, Bill, come on up.
Is the building secure right now to where nobody can get in it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I've been on top of the roof and been all over it, so it's not about to fall down. So I understand concern for safety. It hasn't, and it's not about to fall down. There are parts that absolutely need to be taken care of. I'm just reiterating what I said earlier, so.
Okay. Thank you for answering the question. All right, gentlemen. It's your pleasure.
The order's not defective.
I don't
I
think
make
it
a
is
motion, we deny the appeal with the understanding that Mr. Vondra and Mr. Moore know our expectations.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'll say.
We have a second.
Discussion.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say, since the city attorney said that we could have had a vehicle to give him reprieve tonight, that was the avenue I was trying to explore, and I understand Kevin has been to the T of doing everything right. The city attorney has. I just feel like having that window of opportunity to provide a reprieve would have been an opportunity to do that tonight without complicating it. So I just want to explain that I don't agree with the motion, and I'll vote the other way, and just wanted to have an explanation of that vote before we took it.
I have a question, maybe discussion between us. I think we're accomplishing that. I mean, that's my goal. But by denying the appeal, we're saving ourselves from having to start back at ground zero.
Right.
Should Mr. Warmaker not fulfill his responsibilities? That's my understanding of what we're doing. I respect.
Sure. I think it could have been done easier had we done it with just a reprieve and to allow what he was asking for.
That's fair.
That's just kind of where I would have liked to have seen us go, but I understand the motion and the second, and I understand the thought. So I just wanted to explain where I was coming from and where I'll be tonight. So
I respect that.
Okay. Very good. We have a motion and a second. Let's call the question.
My motion is to deny the appeal.
So we have motion from Daniel and second from Mark. And motion passes 5-1. So a lot more work to be done on that, it sounds like. Item 9, discussion and consideration of an amendment to the sales tax rebate agreement with Elmer Smith Oil Company. And Seth is back up again.
Yes, sir. So a little bit of background that you guys may already be aware of from your time on the commission. In 2016, we entered into a sales tax agreement with Elmer Smith Oil Company to facilitate a development that we now know as the Domino Plaza. So most of you guys are familiar with where SSM Health is located. That's where we're talking about, up on North Harrison. That rebate was for a maximum of $785,000 to recoup the expense of some public infrastructure that had to be constructed as part of the project. So I believe you guys have, as part of your packet, an exhibit showing that infrastructure, but if not, it's also up on the screen. Right. So looking at the project as it sits today, the public infrastructure is complete with the exception of the traffic signal along North Harrison. So Elmer Smith has completed the improvements to 45th Street. They've completed the improvements to John C. Bruton Drive, the sidewalk along the frontage, the dog park is now open, the sewer line extension is complete. The only thing they're lacking is the traffic signal. So the developer has tried to permit the traffic signal with ODOT at both the John C. Bruton Drive and the entrance to what is now SSM Health, and ODOT has denied those requests. So since the traffic signal cannot be permitted, they've come back to us and asked us to amend the original agreement, lowering the maximum incentive by $250,000, effectively removing the traffic signal from the original agreement. So the maximum incentive of the tax rebate would go from $785,000 to $535,000. So with that, I'm sure there'll be some questions, but I'd open it up.
I'll make a motion when we're ready.
Anybody got anything for Seth for motion?
I'll make a
Hear
motion
anything?
to approve the recommendation.
There you go.
I'll second.
Then Mark. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve item 9. We'll call the question. Motion passes 6-0. Item 10, discussion and consideration of a resolution declaring certain types of personal property surplus and no longer needed for city purposes, describing said items and authorizing sale of said items by auction, and in event items do not sell, disposal at the city's discretion. And I think Brad is up. How are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So these are items that have exceeded their useful life. 3 of them we have already replaced with new equipment. The other 2 we've been able to coordinate with other public works departments and complete jobs that those were used for.
We're up a little bit of a pack rat mentality around here, Mr. Commissioners. It's time that we
Clean
get rid
up.
of some of our mess.
I'll make a motion we approve.
Second.
All righty. Daniel. And Darren. All righty, we have a motion and a second. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution declaring certain items of personal property surplus and no longer needed for city purposes, describing said items and authorizing the sale of said items by auction, and in the event items do not sell at auction, disposal at the city's discretion.
Thank you, sir. All right, the motion is second. We'll call the question. And motion passes 6-0. Item 11, discussion and consideration of resolution removing the temporary moratorium on the granting of new business permits and licenses requested under Chapter 8, Article 8, medical marijuana of the Code of Ordinances. The City of Shawnee deferred from August 16, 2021 City Commission meeting. And Joe is up.
All right, you guys are gonna get tired of hearing from me tonight. And I'm gonna address agenda item 12 a little bit, as they dovetail together.
Sure.
And then I'll address any specific questions relating to 12 once that agenda item has been read. But just as a little bit of context, the moratorium came before, the repeal of the moratorium came before this board previously. At that time, it was deferred to this evening to be heard in conjunction with agenda item 12, which relates to a prohibition or curtailment of density of medical marijuana dispensaries. At this time, it is staff's recommendation that the moratorium be repealed. And as a little bit of a preview, it is also staff's recommendation not to pass the further restriction as it relates to the dispensaries. However, because we did discuss bringing that option before the commission simultaneously, we did prepare that ordinance for your consideration. So I understand that may be a bit confusing, but at this point in time, weighing the pertinent factors, primarily liability of the city's police powers, and the need to protect the health and safety of the community, we believe it is in the best interest of the city to simply repeal the moratorium, as the purpose for which it was entered no longer appears to be viable, at least not in the near term, with regard to state legislation that may have directed us in a different path. With regard to the density issue, again, we just generally believe that the
the risks outweigh the positives that will be ascertained from passage of that. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So basically, we'll just be back to where we were a few months ago.
That's correct.
I'm sure this is something we'll probably change 100 times.
Potentially. And I don't think it's stepping out of bounds to address it. We've done a broad survey of other municipalities within the state of Oklahoma that have put further restriction on whether it's dispensaries, whether it's grow operations, whether it's processing operations. We feel comfortable that the ordinance language that's presented in 12 would pass muster if it were subject to a court review. It is very narrowly tailored to reflect language from another municipality in the state of Oklahoma that did have a challenge to its language, and it was upheld in that particular situation. And so we feel comfortable there. Ultimately, what it boils down to is being comfortable that you will prevail in a court process does not prevent the court process, and the court process is very expensive. So with weighing all of those factors, that gives rise to the city's recommendation at this time.
Okay. Any questions? You must have explained it well.
I'll take it.
Seeing that.
Better than the last one.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I move to remove the temporary moratorium.
So approving item 11 then, okay.
I'll second.
Alrighty. And Daniel. Alrighty, and you
Thank
were
you,
up.
Mr. Mayor. A resolution removing the temporary moratorium on the granting of new business permits and licenses requested under Chapter 8, Article 8, Medical Marijuana of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Shawnee.
Alrighty, thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second. We will call the question. And it passes 6-0. So item 12 is discussion and consideration of an ordinance providing for license and permit requirements restricting locations of medical marijuana establishments within the city of Shawnee, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for repeal, and providing for emergency clause. We've already had Joe present. So unless you guys have any further questions for our city attorney. Staff recommendation is to not pass this,
To take no
this one.
action.
Right, okay, take no action, so. So, do we need a motion to take no action?
Nope.
Well, we can move on. I don't even think you have to read, do you?
I do not.
There we go. Item 13, discussion regarding restrictions of shopping carts in public areas. So, Mr. Benson is up. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. As I examine opportunities to address a blossoming problem that's existed in our city for some time, and one that you've all, each and individually expressed as a priority, I've examined other cities' mechanisms by which they can address the moving industry that is fundamentally underscored by shopping carts all over our community. Most of them in question nowhere near the business in which they originated. This gives us the opportunity to enforce the misuse of those items. When we first approached this issue, we found that did not exist in city ordinances, and we're simply asking you for a temperature check, if you will, of whether you want us to pursue this opportunity as a means to address what we all know is an egregious practice. And if you are, then we'll bring it back next session with the applicable ordinance for your consideration and determination. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Then I'm going to presume that if you haven't expressed opposition, that we're going to proceed with that plan, and we'll bring you a decision at that time.
Okay, we don't need to take any action on this either then?
No, this is just, before we indulged our efforts with a lot of labor, I wanted to see if you were opposed to it.
Okay. I think, let's see, item 14, I think we've got you also up here. for
Yes,
this.
sir.
So discussion regarding nuisance liens filed by the city of Shawnee, and
My research tells me that we have almost $1 million in outstanding liens, either for mowing of high grass and weeds or demolition in the community. And it strikes me that, as I've seen in other communities, which I've either resided or managed, that we don't have a mechanism by which we can leverage that investment, if you will. There are several properties in the community that our liens actually exceed their value to the market. Thus, that impediment to redevelopment pretty much eliminates any opportunity for us to better those properties. They linger in that state of limbo because A, the owner can't clear the lien, or B, there's no developer interested in the redevelopment. Now, there are several mechanisms that we can consider, a couple of which I want to bring back in the form of an ordinance. The means by which you can flip those properties, if you will, have some severe guidelines that we must follow. Typically, that requires some sort of charitable organization, be it a COCA or another entity that we can design, or one that currently exists. We could also offer those items by which we have the controlling interest, just much like you did in the previous ordinance, declare them surplus and or buy them at a sheriff's sale, for example. But if we pursue those purchases, the examination that we've given this existing block of properties would indicate that you have an opportunity to further development, because you can lump those lots together. Now, that may include the purchase of some of those lots, but if the end result is a redevelopment on a blighted area, for example, it would be a wise investment. Currently, you do not have a mechanism to pursue that. And secondly, if you don't outright own the properties, but you have a substantial interest in their value via our fees for whatever maintenance was required them, waiving that is also an opportunity that does not currently exist in your portfolio of tools. So again, there are some big hoops we have to jump through, but currently we don't even have a circus to perform in because that capability doesn't exist. I'm asking you to allow us to bring back an ordinance that would embrace those opportunities, and we can give you some examples of other communities on how that's done. So if you're not opposed, I will pursue that option.
Sounds good to me.
Great. I'll just stay here for the next item, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, very good. New business.
I don't have anything to add, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, thank you very much. We'll go to commissioners' comments. You want to go first tonight? You never get to go first, Mark.
First for everything.
There you go.
Property on Main Street, you know, being a property owner and having buildings throughout Shawnee, you know, I really feel for you, you know. The other side of it is the investment that I look at that building that it's gonna take and what the potential value is. It's, you know, I don't know how much insight you've done into that. If it needs a roof, you know, which that's the stuff we're not seeing structurally. All we see is the front of the building. And that's a major undertaking just in that. But I feel for you. And hopefully you can work it out with Joe and Kevin and in a timely manner, because that's going to be the ultimate is, you know, you need to get after it. You know, I know it's kind of a slap in the face when you get a notice in the mail. And I know the city's not communication is I think the issue between the city and you know, to where there wasn't much correspondence between y'all. My take on that, but I know that, you know, the city's not obligated to do that, I presume, Joe? I mean, other than sending a notice out?
Outside of the notices that
I mean,
were submitted.
that's, you know, kind of the burden's on you to kind of keep communicating on that. But, you know, hopefully you can make it work. But the other side of that is from a financial standpoint, you know, to me, it looks like you're going to spend a small fortune on that building, and what's you know, what's market value for that building. So that may be the deal. I mean, that's probably the deal breaker for you. You need to figure that out in a real quick time frame. Other than that, that's about all we got. That's a hard decision.
Yep. Sir?
Mark said that very well, and I agree. I just don't, not an engineer, but the value at the end of that, where are we gonna be? Public safety's gotta be, that's the most important thing, and it's drug on so long that, you know, it's got to be taken care of, so we've kind of laid that groundwork, so. I don't have anything else.
All right, thank you, sir. Do you, Mr. Flood?
Just thank you, staff, and for your hard work, and appreciate all that you guys do.
Mr. Weaver?
I guess I'm going to be the lengthy one. Let me start, Rob. I was looking for your sheet that you normally hand out to us. And normally, I don't think any of us would intentionally disrespect you. And so I'm just addressing you right now that I was looking for your sheet and it wasn't here. And you're usually pretty good to give us a sheet of the things you're addressing. So next, I'd like to say the Lake Advisory Committee, we have met. Mr. Vondran did a great job of facilitating that. We had most of our members. I think there was a little bit of breakdown on email addresses, therefore a couple of the members weren't notified to be able to be there. But we had a great meeting. We have a great committee. I really feel good about the makeup of the committee, Mr. Mayor, and I think at first I wasn't real sure what your thinking was on some of those members, but those that were there, and we all introduced ourselves and talked about our background and ideas and thoughts, and I really felt good about the members, Mr. Mayor, that you've appointed. So I appreciate it. It's going to be a lot of work for the advisory committee, and I just looking forward to us progressing and getting a report back. I want to praise interim city manager a couple of times. One, he's worked to be very helpful on a personal item of a constituent, and I just want to publicly say thank you so much for stepping beyond your role as city manager to try to find a solution that could help, and we're still working on that, and I was grateful. And also I'm grateful because Commissioner Flood and I guess we've, sure others have complained as well, but we've complained about some of the weeds and some of the city problems that we have that maybe haven't been addressed properly, and our city managers come up with a plan to address those, to where we have platoons that apparently are going around town to clean up, and I've really noticed a difference. And I just want to say that's something I've talked about quite a bit before, and I was grateful to see that, so thank you. And then the final thing I have is, I think I know all the commissioners, I've discussed with them and the city manager and city attorney. Most of you may know, but I am going to be resigning as city commissioner. I regret that, but my wife and I have made a decision that's in our best interest, that we're moving into town. So we'll be moving from Ward 2 at Shawnee Lake into Commissioner, I believe it's in, yes, it is in your, and so I'm not going to run against him at the election, I can tell you that. But I regret that. I'll have 2 more meetings. October 4th will be my final meeting, because that's the date that we'll do the lease transfer of our property to the new owner. So I just want to say that I appreciate the mayor that he's going to allow me to continue on the Lake Advisory Committee. And I have a real passion for our lake, for our town. I love Shawnee. Gosh, I was on this commission once before, and when I filed to run and when I got elected, I hadn't had neck surgery, I hadn't had back surgery, and I hadn't had a stent from a heart issue. So it's more than anything, it's a health issue to try to get to something that's more manageable for me at my age and my energy level of what I want to try to maintain as a lawn. So again, I apologize that I've been here for a year, proud for the year. I feel like I've made a difference. I have a couple more meetings, and sometimes I kind of get things roused up, and tonight was one of them, but I felt passionate to try to fight for something that I thought we had a way of making an easier way, but I think the majority of the commission probably feels different, that we can maybe address this in a better way. So again, I'm taking your time tonight, Commissioner Flood, but I appreciate all of you, appreciate city staff, and certainly all you guys. I'm real proud to say I'm a Shawnee City Commissioner, and this is a great group to work with. I hope, and I'm sure that there will be somebody, many people maybe, who are going to be interested in applying for the vacancy. I think the commission has 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, after my last meeting to be able to appoint somebody to fill that spot. Isn't that right? 60 days. 60 days, 60 days, okay. So quickly there will be somebody in there, and I'm sure that, I've already talked to some people that say, well, I might be interested. So here we go. But again, thank you all, and it's been a pleasure, and I still have a couple more meetings, so I can't say goodbye yet. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Mr. Commissioner, welcome to Ward 1.
Thank you.
You have my cell phone and can reach out anytime.
All right.
Thankful for your service, my friend.
Thank you.
Couple things. I think, like Mark mentioned, these issues that we dealt with on Main Street are tough, and I hope you know the seriousness we're dealing with them, and hopefully we found a path that will allow us to resolve it while still maintaining the legal side of it. Humanity is important, because we talk about we're a city, but ultimately we're a bunch of people, and all of our decisions affect people. And as it comes, I want to keep the same filter and thing in mind when we come to item 13, which was the shopping carts. I'm not expressing disagreement, but I want us to consider the human side of that as well as we move forward in it. Item 14, I'm hopeful that we can find something. Mr. Benson and I have talked about Kansas City, which is using a model of rehab rather than demolition, and hopefully we can, some of the vehicles he's talked about tonight we've discussed, and I think that could be a huge win for our city. And Mr. Morris expressed it earlier, and I have some of the same frustrations with people that are trying to give away city property right now. And I appreciate Mr. Benson being one of the two that voted against that. Kind of blew my mind there, but I think we have an opportunity to make the expo see a real turnaround there. I think we're making some progress in some fronts, and it can't be given away by people that don't own it. And appreciate Mr. Benson and Mr. Bondren, who are making sure that doesn't happen.
All righty, thank you, sir. Got a number of things. We talked about an hour at least on Mr. Warmker's building, and I think that's just shows you how serious an issue it is to all of us. I mean, it's a very, very tough thing. I mean, we can't have something that's going to be unsafe. We can't have something that's not up to code, but at the same time, we want to respect the human side of things and give everybody opportunity. I think part of the problem is that, it's gone on so long. I mean, we're kind of at the end of the line on that. So hopefully the decision we made tonight respects that, the decision that was made was legal, and still Mr. Warmker has a window of opportunity to, rectify that if he's really serious about it. And hopefully he is, because like Mark said, we don't want a big hole down there on Main Street. We'd rather not have that. So hopefully that gets worked out. But all these things, when we address them, it's going to be a kind of a gut-wrenching, painful decision for all of us. But I think we've done the right thing tonight. The tourism report, I was really glad that we had that tonight. I know there's been a lot of people expecting something and even mistakenly thinking it was just a report on the lake, and it's clearly it wasn't. And I think Mr. Young has done a good job with that, and I'm anxious to see what we can come up with as a plan to to do what we can to, up tourism and get folks here to Shawnee. The Lake Committee, I was really glad to hear when I got back into town that you guys had met, and it was a sounded like a good meeting. I haven't seen minutes or anything yet, but I heard that it was nice and productive. One thing I do need to address, because you brought it up, I personally have no objection to you staying on that committee. However, it was called to my attention tonight that the language says 2 commissioners.
No.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay.
So, this is the first opportunity you and I have had to talk since you
Right.
called me, the other day.
Shouldn't jump the gun on that comment, should I?
Well, no, that's okay, but I would just soon us address it right here personally, in front of everybody. That the language said 2 commissioners, which I wasn't aware of until we looked that up
Right.
tonight. So that won't be possible, but if there was someone on the committee that wanted to step down and let you take their place, I'm sure that could be worked out. But that's kind of where it stands from a legal standpoint, from a non-attorney anyway. I was glad to see we got a couple of items here from the Traffic Commission. I mean, we hadn't really seen a lot in a while, and I
Mr.
know.
Mayor, we may have an option for you to consider.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We have plenty of time
Cool.
with regard to the existing resolution. It could be amended to say not more than 13, which
Okay.
will allow, and then you could appoint
Well,
Commissioner Weaver as a at-large member effective as of
sounds-
the date of resignation.
Sounds like an easy fix. Okay, that's
Other
good.
than you got to find another volunteer up here.
That's true. That may be the hard part. That may be the hard part. But we'll deal with that one step at a time. But thank you, gentlemen, for bringing that up. Traffic Commission, I was glad to see we had a couple things come from them. I know, we have folks that ask for things, and we direct them to the Traffic Commission, and I'm glad, to see a couple things work all the way through to us, and I was just happy to see that. Also, I want to again thank Commissioner Flood for the idea of the certificate to give the kids for being the mayor at the open our meeting. I think that's a really neat thing that that'll probably be an important thing to them for a long time, and I think that's great that we have the kids do that, and I know they get a kick out of it. Someone brought up cleanup, and I wanted to point out that the grants that we applied for, we got. So there was that Love Your Neighborhood grant, or I remember, was that the name of it, Warren?
Love Your Block.
Love Your Block. And so we're going to get to love some blocks, as a result of that. And we appreciate your efforts and Sarah's efforts on bringing that money to Shawnee. I mean, I say we'll spend everybody else's money that we can. So hopefully, that'll be a really good thing. I'm confident it will be. One thing, okay, I might have one more thing here. Rob, you brought up us not looking at you. When we're taking notes, I mean, naturally your head's going to be down. No one means any disrespect to anybody. And we do the same thing for everybody that comes up here. We try to take notes so that we can address it, or we even have a question. In fact, I had a question for you, but you turned tail and took off back to your seat very quickly. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to come at you with that. I'm just saying that we really do listen to you. We listen to everybody that talks to us, and we do try to take notes so we can address things. So just know that nobody's disrespecting you or anybody else that comes up to address us. In fact, we really appreciate everybody that comes up and does talk to us. So just know that, and please believe that. Final thing, I wanted to just thank Commissioner Weaver for his service, and I think you've done this twice, and then also has served us as state representative. But both of those are very hard jobs, and you take a lot of abuse, and we appreciate you doing that, and sorry you're going to have to move on. Keep Daniel in line if you would, please.
That's right, I will.
And anyway, so that's all I've got, but thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Well, before we move on,
Yes, sir.
you're thanking me for the idea of the the junior mayor, mayor for the day certificate. But I need to also recognize that Miss Erica Bass from our tourism department is the one that built that for us. And so, although it was an idea, it was, not, I can't take full credit for it. So the fact that she made it and it looks like a very, very fantastic looking document, that was,
Thank
we
you
need
to
yeah.
everybody involved in that. All righty, we will move on to the Airport Authority. So item 1 is consider approval of consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All righty. Neil and Bob, we have a motion and a second. We will call the question. And for some reason, there we go. Now it passes 6-0. Item 2, discussion and consideration of a request to transfer, amend, and extend a non-aeronautical commercial lease agreement with Brown Derby. And Bonnie is up. How are you, Bonnie?
I'm well, thank you, sir. How are y'all?
Doing great.
Just in case you don't help you with the visual aids, there's quite a lot of maps and drawings, so Mr. Benson recommended we give you close-ups.
There we go. Thank you for that.
We like pictures.
Yes, we do.
got pictures, perhaps?
Could have brought us hamburgers, too.
Well, I'll tell you what, I
Since we
saw a
were-
pizza when I went down the hall a minute ago. I'm not saying whose desk it's on.
Mm-hmm.
It was in high risk. So thank you very much for the time this evening. I tried to make it brief. I know we've had a long night. I'm happy to present the very first item, which is the request that received from the operators of the Brown Derby Drive-In, which is a landmark of Shawnee. And in this particular case, the action is to help support its continued life. The current owner has an active lease with the Shawnee Airport Authority, which they would like to extend, but they'd like to transfer it to a new entity, an entity in partnership with one of our successful local businesses, the Boomerang Diner folks. I'm sure most folks know the DeGraff and Reeds from the Boomerang. They have several different iterations of their legal names, so if it's okay with everyone, I'm just going to say they're Boomerang folks.
Okay.
They have worked with the Brown Derby team to form a new LLC for the opportunity to put a facelift on the building and to bring back some of the nostalgia of its original early days, light it up a little bit better, and make it just that much more appealing to people visiting Shawnee. As we talked earlier, a specific attraction to the area. In order to do this, technically speaking, we would have to transfer the existing lease from the current owner to this newly formed LLC, this sort of partnership between the two entities, to allow that business to work as a new business, taking on the responsibilities of the lease. They have offered to put a minimum of $10,000 worth of capital improvements into the existing building. I know many of you gentlemen have been there. You know it's a very small building, and $10,000 at a minimum will go an awful long way to help move it forward. They have requested sort of payback for their commitment to have 5 years on the lease extended with an additional 20 extension at the option of the Airport Authority, which basically means as long as they're in compliance with all the terms and conditions, then we would work with them, but it wouldn't be a unilateral tenant request or extension. The other recommendation we're making tonight is to comply with the existing Airport Authority lease policy to include an escalator clause in the lease, which is not in the current lease, it's an older lease, which would then allow each year the escalation of the rental value based on the prior year's consumer price index rate of inflation for all goods and services nationwide. As an idea, over the past several years, that figures range between 2.3% to 1.4%, depending on the national trends in the economy. So it's not a significant number. And also to include an opportunity to do a routine around every 5 years for market value assessment on the property to make sure that the rental stays within the scope of property in that area. The most recent one for this property was done in 2017, so in about a year or so. After the improvements are made, obviously there'd be a valuation difference. So in speaking to the city manager and the Airport Advisory Board, the recommendation is to go ahead with a transfer and assumption to the newly created LLC and to create this new lease that would have these extra provisions in it.
Does the new LLC, are they aware of your intention to re-look at the fair market value as far as the rent goes?
Yes, thank you for the question. Their current lease does actually have that 5-year cycle in it, so that's not necessarily new. It's just as an explanation to when we go forward with the next version of the document, we would include that as well as the escalation clause.
Okay.
Any other questions for Bonnie? Got a motion? All righty.
Second.
All righty, we have a motion and a second for approval. And we will call the question. For some reason, I'm not doing that well. There we go, past the 6-0. Thank you very much, Mike. Item 3, discussion and consideration of a submission of a land lease request with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, for the purpose of amending the land use classification of airport property for use by the Oklahoma Military Department. So you're up again, ma'am.
Look again. Again, I'll try to be brief, but as described earlier, this one's a bit on the complex side. So hopefully the maps will help.
Yep.
And my partner Ryan goes very slowly on this one, and we'll do a little bit of a zigzag. The Oklahoma Military Department is planning to consolidate 2 existing facilities. One, they're both, from my understanding, both armory batteries. One is here in the city of Shawnee, and another is in a different city in the state of Oklahoma. It is the military department's preference to expand their presence in Shawnee, bringing the other battery here. And they have selected a location at the west side of the Shawnee Airport, west of the Funway. And it is my understanding that this has been a project that's been around for a number of years. You might notice that Tim's come back.
He's back.
Because, you know, we are at the critical point. Tim has put 10 years into this project, and so I wanted to acknowledge him and acknowledge the support that he's given and the effort he's put into this. And so we've gotten to the stage now where the Oklahoma Military Department has confirmation of funding for construction. The location that they've, again, as identified, has been on the west side of the airfield. And you can see, I think, from the maps in front of you, that we show the yellow area as the initial development site, which is the 40 acres there. There's 50 additional acres there as well, which would allow for future expansion of this facility. Not currently guaranteed, not even currently requested, because the military is almost as long in the decision-making process as we are at the airport. The other thing I would like to point out while we're on this slide as well is in the blue section in the upper right, you'll see the future hangar development areas. That becomes critical when we get to stage 2 of this discussion. So moving on from there. The acreage in question was classified as aeronautical development. It needs to be reclassified for non-aeronautical development. And one of the critical things to point out, I think, is that even if we do reclassify it now, that doesn't mean we can't do aeronautical development. Right. It just means we have the opportunity to do non-aeronautical as well. The guard is at the existing facility now on Saratoga Street. You can see there. It's really very tiny. They can barely handle the mission that they're accomplishing now in the small facility. It's only a 12,500 square foot building. They have to park a lot of their equipment outside, along the back, along the parking lots. This is military equipment, trucks, weaponry, things of this nature. They certainly cannot accommodate a second battery joining this group here. The building was sold to the state of Oklahoma by the city of Shawnee, and the Oklahoma Military Department's intention would be, if this process is approved, to then return that facility to the city of Shawnee for obvious reuse, release, or other uses the city may decide to do. In order to do all of this, we have to stop at the FAA. Mm-hmm. And I am going to ask you to wind your clock back to World War II.
Oh, gosh.
At the end of World War II, the United States Navy, in its great generosity, gave the city of Shawnee not only the airport that they had borrowed for several years, but a number of pieces of property all the way around the airport as we know it now, outside the fence, which is one of the reasons why the Airport Authority manages the Brown Derby lease and other properties along Kickapoo and Independence. When the city of Shawnee accepted all of the acreage back from the grateful government, they signed an agreement with the War Assets Administration that said that they would be governed by the terms and conditions of operating the airport per the FAA. This gives the FAA a role in deciding how that land will actually be developed in the future. The second piece of it, which is I think a legitimate overview reason, is that the FAA routinely gives the airport authority funding to do capital development. And they like to be sure that the decisions that are made are in a pattern that makes sense. And they give us $1 million to build a runway extension, and then we build, a building at the end of it, making it difficult to use it. So you classify the various plots of land on the airfield for different development purposes. And the FAA makes the decision about whether that's compatible with the money they've already spent and the money they intend to spend with us in the future. So we have to get FAA authorization to reclassify the acreage in question to allow us that flexibility to build this facility and possibly other non-aeronautical facilities in the future. Have I lost you yet? I know it's late.
That's good.
So the map you see in front of you is part of the submission package, which would show the location of the new battery. Battery readiness center, which includes 2 batteries, which has got a really long name and an awful lot of numbers associated with it, but it is principally what we have going on now here in Shawnee with the addition of another battery that would join the existing stack. The new facility will be referred to as a readiness center, consolidating the Alpha and Bravo batteries. We're looking at 11 to 15 full-time personnel. On drill and training event weekends, we're looking up to about 300 personnel utilizing this facility and the equipment. The city manager and the airport advisory board have reviewed the proposals, the terms and conditions, and they are recommending that we seek opportunity from the FAA to reclassify the land and enter into a sublease agreement with the Oklahoma Military Department. The reason it's a sublease agreement is because the airport authority would then turn around and lease the land to the city of Shawnee, and the city of Shawnee would then be able to offer it to the military department at a nominal fee.
Questions? I know we've been working this for a long time. I mean, this is really good news in my mind.
I just thought Tim was lost.
I'm sorry?
I thought Tim was lost.
Make a wrong turn.
Yeah?
Out of habit.
No, he would have been back
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, he would have been over there. Yeah,
Brad got his seat.
yeah. All right, anybody got any questions for Bonnie? Anyone want to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All righty. Daniel and Bob. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. Item 3, we will call the question. And that passes 6-0. This is exciting news, I think. Item 4, new business.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. So we are adjourned, and we will move to the Shawnee Municipal Authority. So item 1 is consider approval of consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve and a second for item 1. We'll call the question. And that passes 6-0. Item 2, discussion and consideration to purchase restroom shower facility to be installed at Isaac Walton Campground and Swim Area at Shawnee Twin Lake Number 1 in the amount of $96,591. And Brad is up again.
Yes, last spring, you guys approved a restroom facility for Glenn Collins. This is this year's fiscal purchase, and it will be installed at Isaac Walton. It will have two restrooms and 2 shower units. This will be purchased on the same Sourcewell contract that the original is in the process of being purchased on.
Okay.
Will that be located where the existing restroom facility is, or will it be on the outside?
We will have it more in a central location from the camping area and the swim area as well. Possibly by where the dumpster is currently.
Oh, good. I'm sure glad to see the showers included in that, so that was great, exciting to see it. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? We'll make a motion.
I'd make a motion, we approve.
Thank you, sir. We have a
Second.
motion. Second, Aaron. All right, we have a motion and a second for item 2. We'll call the question. And that passes 6-0. So item 3, discussion and consideration of budget amendment for Fund 501, Shawnee Municipal Authority to fund restroom improvements at Glen Collins Park, Shawnee Lakes. And Mr. Bussell is up. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good evening. Yeah, it's for the Glen Collins restroom that was approved in the last fiscal year budget. Pulling that forward so we can start it in this fiscal year.
All righty. Any questions? It's pretty straightforward. Anyone want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
All right, thank you, sir.
I'll say.
And Mark, okay, we have a motion and a second. We will call the question. And that passes 6-0. All right, item 4. Discussion and consideration of resolution declaring certain items of personal property surplus and no longer needed for Shawnee Municipal Authority purposes, describing said items and authorizing the sale of said items by auction, and in the event items do not sell at auction, disposal of Shawnee Municipal Authority's discretion. So Brad is up again.
So this is some more equipment that's listed under SMA that is past its useful life. Some of these items, replacement parts are virtually obsolete.
Right. Yep. Any questions? No questions? Anyone want to make a motion? All right, Mark.
Second.
Second, Darren. All right, Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution declaring certain items of personal property surplus and no longer needed for Shawnee Municipal Authority purposes, describing said items and authorizing the sale of said items by auction, and in the event items do not sell at auction, disposal at Shawnee Municipal Authority's discretion.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second. We'll call the question. And that passes 6-0. Any new business?
I wouldn't dare, Mr. Mayor.
All righty. I'm so glad to hear that. All right, it's time to go home. Let's adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.